All right. Welcome, everybody, including myself, to the September 12th, 2024 City of Edina Planning Commission meeting. On behalf of the rest of the commission, we are grateful you are here in person, and to those tuning in remotely. I say it every time, but your participation, your curiosity, and your feedback is instrumental to this process as we navigate change together here in Edina, specifically regarding the ways in which we like to use our land. So we have 2 public hearings tonight, and I will get into kind of what to expect for that process later, right before they start. And we have 1 report and recommendation. And like any time we have meetings, there's always an opportunity for the community, our residents, to comment and get feedback to us, and we commit to you that it's gotten to us and that we consider it before we make recommendations tonight. So if you are unfamiliar with how to participate in advance, the best way is our engagement website, www.bettertogetheredina.org. And there's been a variety of improvements that you'll notice on that site, with a development tracker kind of on GIS, so you can see location-based proposals, which make it a little easier to connect to what's happening in your neighborhood. You can comment on specific matters, or you can send an email to the planning department and it'll get to us. So as I mentioned, there's 2 public hearings. I'll get into that later, but for what to expect for the meeting tonight, the agenda goes as follows. We'll have a roll call, then we'll approve tonight's meeting agenda, followed by the prior meeting's minutes. Then we'll have a community comment period, which is your chance to speak about a matter not on tonight's agenda. And then we have the public hearings, followed by the reports and recommendation, with which we have 1. And then we wrap things up with chair and member comments and staff comments, and then we adjourn. So without further ado, call the meeting to order, and we'll do roll call.
Commissioner Elkire.
Here.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Padilla.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Jaw. Commissioner Day.
Here.
Commissioner Bornstein.
Here.
Commissioner Felt.
Here.
Commissioner Hanneman.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. And then we have the approval of tonight's meeting agenda. If there aren't any proposed changes, I'd welcome a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Next, we have the approval of the prior meeting's minutes from August 28th, as well as a special work session from August 14th.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right, next we have the community comment period. And this is a chance for anyone who is here in person to speak about a matter not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes to do so. You can come up to either podium, state your full name, address. Light turns green, that means go. And then when it's red, we ask you to wrap it up. Anyone here for community comment? All right. Seeing none, we will close the community comment period. Before we get into public hearings, just one thing I'd like to add as I look next to me, we have a new face in the crowd. One cool thing, yeah. No, we don't do, it's only in person. So one cool thing the City of Edina does is we welcome the opportunity for at least 2 student commissioners, so people who are in high school that know and care enough to be a part of this process. It always wows me with, one, the commitment to come here, and usually it's a 1 to 2 year term, and we have some late meetings, and it's quite a commitment. But I'd like to give you the chance to introduce yourself and maybe just tell us a little bit about you and why you wanted to join. Put you on the spot.
Hi, I'm Aditi. I'm a sophomore at Edina High School. A little about me, I do varsity debate, I'm in band, And why I wanted to be on the commission is because I agree with you. Land and land use is super important, and I'm excited to just like kind of be involved in decision making in Edina. Sounds super fun to me.
Big kudos to you, like, big kudos. Yeah, Commissioner Elker.
Quick question. Welcome again. And what instrument?
I play the trumpet.
Great.
Nice. All right. Cool, thank you. So as mentioned, we have 2 public hearings tonight, so we're on to that part of the agenda. The first one is an ordinance amendment concerning the Heritage Preservation Commission and Edina Heritage Landmarks and update to the Country Club Plan of Treatment. What to expect with a public hearing process-wise is either there's a formal application that comes into the city about a specific matter for land use and application, or there's maybe something like this that touches on land use that requires our recommendation before it gets to the city council. Either way, city staff puts together a staff report based on a bunch of factual findings, and then they provide us a presentation based off of that report. We have a quick exchange, questions back and forth. Then we open it to the applicant. Here it's a different commission, but other times it might be a private landowner or a resident or a developer. And then they can present, and then we have another set of questions back and forth. And then we open it to a public hearing, which is your chance as a resident to testify about the matter, whether in person for 3 minutes or tuning in remotely. And I'll give you the number after I wrap this up. And after we close that, then it comes back to the Planning Commission to deliberate, and we ultimately recommend an approval or denial of the request at hand. So for those tuning in remotely, just so you can get ready, you'll want to call the following number, 312-535-8110, and then you'll enter access code 2632-058-2795, followed by the password 5454, and there's more. Then press star 3 on your keypad to get in the queue to speak. So you don't have to do that quite yet, but hopefully that information's on the screen for you, and then we'll open that again when we officially open the public hearing. I mean, it's open, but once it's your time to kind of testify. With that, we'll turn it over. Yeah, how do you pronounce your last name again?
Dalrymple.
Dalrymple, okay. To Emily to present, thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. At the direction of the City Council, the HPC subcommittee of 3 commissioners, Jane Lonquist, Bob Cundy, and Rachel Pollack, worked with city staff and the city's preservation consultants, Elizabeth Gales and Rachel Peterson of Hess Royce and Company, on drafting changes to the ordinance, Country Club District Plan of Treatment, and supplemental documents that are in front of you tonight. The draft documents were presented and unanimously recommended by the Heritage Preservation Commission to the Planning Commission and City Council. The HPC also has an advisory communication that outlines their process and their recommendation, which was included in your packet tonight. The draft changes are in front of you because they include an amendment to the city's zoning ordinance. Tonight, the Planning Commission is asked to hold a public hearing on the proposed changes and make a recommendation to City Council. The proposed ordinance deals with the city's landmark properties and landmark district. The ordinance affects all of these properties, although there are specific changes and some supplemental documents that pertain specifically to the city's landmark district, which is the Country Club District. The city's landmark properties include the Baird House, the Browndale Bridge, Cahill School, the Edina Country Club District, the Edina Mills site, the Edina Theater sign, Grange Hall, Grimes House, Oscom House, the Peterson House, and the Wooddale Avenue Bridge. The red stars on the map represent these properties, and the red shaded area is the Country Club District. The blue boxes on the map are eligible properties, and this ordinance does not affect those properties. They're just shown as eligible to be designated as a landmark one day, if they so choose. At the time each landmark property and district was designated as an Edina Heritage Landmark, a nomination study and a plan of treatment was created and ultimately approved by City Council. Those nomination studies include history on each of the landmark properties, And the plan of treatment documents are created to provide specific guidelines for design review, recommendations for preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction for each landmark property. The HPC staff has outlined some high-level changes and recommendations that are in each document that is in front of you tonight. The first is the ordinance, and the ordinance affects Chapter 2, Chapter 10, and Chapter 36 of Edina City Code, and all of those changes pertain to the Heritage Preservation Commission and the Edina Heritage Landmarks. The changes that were made added clarity to some of the definitions, including demolition and the definition of a street-facing facade, added definitions of demolition by neglect, character-defining features, inserted a one-year time limit for a certificate of appropriateness. A permit must be pulled within 1 year of a COA approval. It clarifies when a COA is required, as well as what work is exempt from a certificate of appropriateness in a landmark district. Expanded the maintenance of the heritage resources section, added an escrow requirement for permits for all heritage landmark properties and districts, and also wanted to note that no changes were proposed for when a COA is required for a landmark property. No changes to those existing plan of treatment documents are proposed, so it's only to when COAs are required for properties within a landmark district. The second set of documents, or the second document, is the proposed Edina landmark property and district escrow fee. This is a new form that's to be signed by a contractor and a property owner that acknowledges the responsibility to maintain and protect historic resources throughout the construction process, and then to inform staff on proposed changes or any proposed changes that are made throughout the construction process. The fee that is proposed would be based on project valuation. An escrow fee of $3,000 would be required if a project is under $100,000 and requires a certificate of appropriateness. And a fee of $15,000 would be required at the time of a permit if the valuation is over $100,000. And these fees would be due at the time of a permit, and the city would be able to use those to keep structures weather tight and protected throughout the construction process if necessary. And then the fee would be refunded when all permits have been closed out at the end of the construction process. The third document is the plan of treatment for the Country Club District. So in that document, there was some added general context, a map that was added, and an explanation that was added about the period of significance for the district. Added a 1-year time limit for COAs that reflects the proposed ordinance change. Explains what the certificate of appropriateness application requirements and what that review process is like. Emphasizes that construction must follow the approved plans, and explained how to get a COA amendment if your project may change throughout the process. Clarifies which design review elements are recommended guidelines rather than requirements, and then added a section on character defining features. And the last document is a new resource that is to supplement the Country Club Plan of Treatment that provides some photos and examples and lists character defining features for some of the most prevalent architectural styles in the Country Club District. And this is used really, or the HPC and staff views this as more of a resource for property owners and architects and contractors as they're planning for projects and designing projects. They can reference that document and see what kind of things the Heritage Preservation Commission is looking for. And so with that, I'll stop. Sorry, a lot of information all at once, but I will introduce Jane Longquist, the chair of the HPC, and she's going to go through some additional changes.
Great, thanks for your time. And I really am not going to add additional changes, but just sort of emphasize high-level themes and some key details in the thorough presentation that Emily just gave. So the existing guidance that our commission has is the plan of treatment specific to the Country Club District. And that's the bulk of our work, is reviewing homes there and exterior changes that come before us. And we also, although it's used less frequently, the city ordinance, as Emily explained, applies to all heritage landmarks. And so there were needs for change. Your packet went into some cases that prompted the need to dig into things further. And what we found was that there were inconsistencies between the two in some of the key definitions. In addition, the current plan of treatment for Country Club talks about historic facades and streetscapes, a somewhat vague term. And the city ordinance was missing some key definitions. And also critically, that staff found that they were missing some tools for addressing noncompliance. So the proposed guidance, these are the two existing documents with the changes. So just high level, we're doubling the size of the plan of treatment for the district, and we're focusing specifically on street-facing facades, which had been in practice, but let's call that out and be clear on where the purview of the Heritage Preservation Commission is. A clear scope, a real strong emphasis on the character-defining features on that front facade, and still, of course, the guiding document is the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, which is the key mode here, right? That homes need to be updated and rehabilitated, but you can do so in a way that maintains their historic character and exterior. So the city ordinance, I just wanted to highlight that the definitions, we added a lot more terms, nearly doubling that. And in the current ordinance has no language about district changes, so homes within a district, as Emily said. So we were using the 4 key elements that would trigger a certificate of appropriateness if you were a landmark property. Well, it's somewhat different in the district. So staff came up with 9 criteria, most of which talk about changes to that street-facing facade. So it's explicit language to be clear on how we should deal with change in the country club district. And also, importantly, calling out demolition by neglect, which is a phrase that many other towns and cities use and forbid. We just hadn't used that language in the past. New tools for staff. This is where the escrow form comes in. And importantly, it's not just a fee, but it's a chance for contractors and property owners to sign off and say, I understand this language that's in the ordinance. Emily explained this fee structure. Smaller projects that don't have a COA would not need the escrow fee. Also adding a tool so that staff can look at like-for-like changes, simple things like redoing your exterior or replacing your windows, and staff can decide, guess what, this is street-facing facade, but this does not need to go before the HPC. So just some clearer mechanisms are in this new escrow fee. The other new tool is the document Emily mentioned on details, on character-defining features with some photos and a chance to educate people about the 7 main architectural styles, period revival styles in the district. And also clarity on how the amendment process works, right? So the new focus is protecting historic integrity of the neighborhood. That's the language in the new plan of treatment, and that's a good summary of what we're trying to do and why we're proposing these changes as improvements to the existing process.
Thank you, Jane. And then just some additional information that I wanted to inform the Planning Commission about is that the city sent out mailed notices to all property owners of landmark properties and properties within the historic district, and then sent an email to contractors that have pulled a permit in the country club district in the last few years. So it was a list of about 350 contractors. The project has been on Better Together, and there has, I'm sure you've all have seen, but there has been a few comments made on Better Together on the proposed changes. The city has also submitted the draft documents to the State Historic Preservation Office, who provided their comments on the proposed changes, and those comments were addressed in the documents that are before you tonight. There were just minor spelling and capitalization preferences that they had. So with that, tonight staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission recommends City Council adopt the proposed ordinance 2024-06 with the following changes to section 36-723. That is to number 5 in that list of when a certificate of appropriateness is required in a country club or in the landmark district. And that's just to add some clarity to the fact that if an addition is put on a detached garage, it would also require a certificate of appropriateness. Staff recommends implementing the proposed ordinance changes when the building department implements a new software system to verify that the appropriate permitting changes can be implemented with limited impacts to customer service. The building department is looking at implementing their new software system in January of 2026. So this would be, staff would agree with the building department and their official, the building official memo that was included in your packet tonight. And with that, I can answer any questions. The Heritage Preservation Commissioners, Jane Longquist and Bob Cundy are here, and so is the city's preservation consultants. Rachel and Elizabeth from Hess Royce.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Jane. Any questions, fellow commissioners? I see some nods. All right, Lou, you got it. Start it off.
Yeah, does anything here prevent an ADU being built on any of these properties?
It would need, not as far as getting a certificate of appropriateness. Adding an ADU would require a certificate of appropriateness, but it would also need to meet the zoning requirements. So it would just be reviewed. There'd be an additional step to get a certificate of appropriateness in the country club district.
Okay, so there's nothing really preventing them. Okay, thank you.
And just come down the line. All right.
All right, thank you. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions as we go along here. I just want to get a good sense of the process that the team should follow. You know, if you just like walk us through, you know, a resident wants to add or build something in their home, and how does that process start and go through, and then in the end, assuming that they would need a COA, right? And just assume that the COA was approved. And in particular, if you could focus in on like the evaluation of the project itself, like when we put a rate of 3,000 escrow for below 100,000 and then 15,000 for above, like who comes up with that evaluation, and how do you make that determination? Is if you could talk about that in the process. And then from a timeline perspective, right? How long, assuming that all the documentation is provided for the application, how long does the city take before they approve it or make a decision on the COA?
So first, I'll address your questions on how those escrow fee numbers were come up with. The planning department worked with the building department on coming up with those escrow numbers. And those were based on the fact, again, based on permit valuation numbers, but also on the fact that the building department's recommendation was to make those numbers different than current escrow fees that the city requires today. And so it's to make those valuations different so it's easy to track from a financial standpoint, and when people are getting permits and there's multiple escrows they have to pull, it's clear which escrow is for what item. And so the numbers came directly from the building department, who recommended those numbers. The second question on process, to get a certificate of appropriateness, oftentimes I have lots of people reach out to me directly asking on whether or not their project would require a COA. So to kind of kick off the process, staff sits down with an applicant to talk through their project, whether or not it will require COA and what that COA process looks like. After I have that initial meeting, once the city receives a completed COA application or COA packet, then it gets placed on a heritage preservation agenda. The complete application is due 30 days prior to a COA meeting, so very similar to how variances are processed. Once the city receives an application, we send the application to the city's preservation consultant, Hess Royce. They do their evaluation of the project and provide a memo to city staff. City staff sends out a notification to property owners within 200 feet of the property. It's put on Better Together. Staff does a staff report, very similar to the variance process. And then once it gets to the Heritage Preservation Commission meeting, the Heritage Preservation Commission takes action on those COAs that night. And then there is a 10-day appeal period. So then if the COA, anyone can appeal a decision made by the Heritage Preservation Commission to City Council. So after that, a 10-day appeal period, the applicant may get their building permit if the COA was approved and their plans match what was approved by the HPC. So it's about, if the timing lines up exactly, it could be potentially 40 days, give or take.
So that's like a minimum, of 40 days at least is how long it's going to take.
And
but,
just so it's clear, that's the process now, and that process isn't changing.
Gotcha. And in terms of the evaluation of the project, can you just talk about how the city or the resident, how do you guys determine if it's a 100K project or not?
So that's based on the permit valuation. So the valuation is the valuation of the permit. It's the materials. It's not necessarily on. Do you want to answer how the building department determines that value?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but I believe it's somewhat established through the Uniform Building Code, values that way.
It's usually just straight linear percentage of the fee, what you estimate the project to cost.
Yep, so the
1%.
contractor would enter that information in, and then the building department reviews that valuation to determine it's fair. And they make some changes, but, so it's not a valuation that the city provides or puts on. I don't determine whether or not the project is valued at $100,000 or less than $100,000.
Gotcha. So the developer, as part of the process, would determine what the value of the project is. City staff would then review it, just look at it, make sure that it makes sense. Like if it's, over or under, they would kind of get a good gut check of that. And then that is how it gets entered in, and then you could determine the escrow amounts from that time.
Correct.
And just the last part is like at the end, so we kind of went through the process of, making the application. Do you hold the escrow amounts until the whole project is completed and the permits have been released? Like, just talk to me about the end part of that process when the escrow money goes back, I guess.
Yep, so the applicant would request building finals, so on their project. So they would require that or request that through the building department. A lot of those finals are done through their department. And then planning staff would also go out at that point and make a final inspection to review the fact that the project matches the approved plans, at least from an exterior perspective. And then once that has been finalized or closed off, then their escrow fee could be released at that point.
Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla.
Do you know if the homes in this area that we're talking about, is it 100% owner occupied?
I do not know what the percentage of rental versus owner occupied houses are in the neighborhood. I don't
Okay.
have that information.
But it's certainly a significant majority, I would guess.
I would imagine so.
So, okay. My principal question, though, is about kind of unforeseen circumstances. I understand the intent, certainly, behind the recommendation and behind the action. I recall, well, it must have been 20, maybe 23 years ago, there was a huge storm, and the country club area looked like a war zone. Basically, there were trees just down all over the place, all over roofs. It was a disaster. And looks like you remember it as well. So what plans or what modifications come in to solve the practical issues that you encounter? Because 40 days, if, there's an enormous tree, there's a hole in your roof, or there's a flood or something like that, and I believe that Nate brought this up at the end of his memo. And is an insurance company going to be able to deal with all of these issues? And it does mean the homeowner has to put up this fee as opposed to the insurance company. So if you could talk to the unforeseen circumstances aspect.
Yeah, there is a section in the proposed ordinance in front of you, 36-728, that Nate references in his memo. And that's in those emergency situations where in those situations, the building official can determine when emergency repairs need to happen. So he can kind of take control over that if needed.
And then you can go around all of these requirements, or what happens at that point?
There are certain requirements that would be, at least to get projects weatherproofed and things to be covered up, that would be able to be kind of figured out in that emergency situation.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify too that replacing a roof and repairing a roof with like-for-like materials does not trigger a certificate of appropriateness.
Right, but
So,
the circumstances end up, I realize that if all you're doing is replacing it to the way it was, but consider, that might not always be the case. And somebody's going to say, well, I've always wanted to do something else, and now I have an opportunity. So you end up having to get a certificate of appropriateness and go through all of these rigmarole. Thank you.
Well,
I wanted to follow up on the escrow fee. You mentioned in there that if city staff goes to the escrow, that the homeowner or the contractor continues to put money in that escrow?
At the request, so if the city has to pull from the escrow account the escrow money would only be used if this structure needs to be kept weather tight. So it wouldn't be used to complete a project, or it wouldn't be used to add architectural details to a house that are missing. But if the city needs to pull on an escrow or pull out money from that escrow account, the city could request at that time that the escrow be added back to if needed.
And I feel I appreciate like all the work that went into this. I see it in the documents, but it worries me about an open-ended kind of escrow that it can just keep.
Well, it's in hopes that contractors throughout the process keep the houses weather tight, and we would only foresee to use it in emergency type situations where we can't gain compliance from the contractors when we would pull money from that escrow account.
Sorry, so I think you tried to explain it to Commissioner Smith, but can you, might have to go back over it just because I maybe didn't follow. But what was the recommendation for the addition of the escrow based on? Right, so how did we come to that recommendation in the first place?
There were certain projects that was a lot of neighborhood concern that projects weren't being kept weather tight throughout the construction process. A lot of these projects take a long time, so it's through multiple season changes and things. And when a roof is pulled out or siding's pulled off or windows are taken out and replaced, and there was concern that houses weren't being kept weather tight. And so staff worked with the building department and our city attorneys and kind of came up with this escrow fee recommendation to the Heritage Preservation Commission that was an option at that point, or could be an option. And so it was really seen to try to protect the historic structures, and it's used as more of a compliance mechanism to get people to complete the projects and to complete them as they were approved.
Okay. How many projects or houses would we say that this was a problem on? I mean, in Better Together, I kept seeing a reference to a house on Arden Avenue. But was it, I mean, are we talking 1, 2, 3, a lot, and that's why we needed to add the escrow? Or was it based off of a lot of pushback on maybe 1 or 2 particular projects?
In the last few years, I'd say there's a few, but in the last 20 years, I'd say there's more than a few that this has come up with, or at least staff has received comments on.
And typically, it's because of the long-term nature of the project that it's going on for. I mean, you said so. A lot of these projects take a long time, right? So, but then of course, the escrow would have to be held on to for a long time as well. Okay. What are like do you know the average age of properties in the Country Club District?
The majority of homes in the Country Club District were built between 1924 and 1944, and that's that period of significance that was referenced. I could defer to our consultants to know if they know how many were built within the period of significance. Close to 90% of the houses were built in that period.
Okay. And do you think the average age, I mean, in terms of the average age of the residents in the Country Club neighborhood, does it tend to trend on the older side, or do you say it's fairly representative of Edina in general?
I do not have that information. There's 2 residents of the district and commission members that might be able to answer that a little better, but I know as a planning staff, I get lots of questions on people moving in and out of the district often, so there's lots of new people coming in and out of the district. I guess I don't have any information on their age.
Okay. I mean, where I'm going with that is it's probably fair to say, based on the age of the properties in the Country Club District, that a lot of them will require significant maintenance, both now and into the future, right? To trigger this escrow amount, and it doesn't really take a lot nowadays to go over $100,000. So I mean, I understand the COA piece for smaller value projects. But if you have, particularly, I guess, income restricted and not income restricted, people that are living on a fixed income in a house that was built in 1924, right, and they need to replace all their windows. Well, if you go to, say, Anderson Windows, for example, and I speak from experience, they're pretty expensive. You could definitely go over $100,000 really easily. And then you're facing an additional $15,000 escrow on top of that. And to me, I'm not sure that that's necessary or that something that I would support right now. But yeah, okay. So that's my questions for the moment.
I guess maybe could you elaborate on those specific values? Just the 3,000 versus 15. It seemed almost arbitrary to just have them different than other ones. Just curious.
I think the building, again, the previous building official we talked with him about those numbers, and I think a lot of it was on a project that could be more significant. What is the cost of providing that weatherproofing if they have to do it? And so that's the number that he came up with. So on a larger project, if they have to weatherproof the entire back of the house or windows that are torn out, what would that cost?
Okay. Commissioner Felt?
I'm going back to the escrow again, too. I'm working on a project now where the homeowner has to put down an escrow for a tree. And it is causing them a lot of concern because they have saved up for a long time for the project they're doing. And now that they had to take down a tree that was within the building pad, had to pay for that, and have to put this escrow down and have to jump through these hoops that is becoming like 10% of the cost of the project and gives them some anxiety. So I think I'm kind of anxious about the escrow too, and the fact that it's cash escrow, that there's no letter of credit. And I know for the tree ordinance, the city has decided to take letters of credit instead because it's playing out in all sorts of unforeseen ways. So the escrow piece concerns me too, and I understand that there's been difficulties and a lot of friction in the neighborhood, but I think we might come up with some things that occur that nobody was expecting. Might make some homeowners anxious during their remodeling projects.
Commissioner Hanneman.
Was a letter of credit as an option discussed? Unpopular opinion. I thought the numbers were really low. If you're going to go replace all of the windows on a 100-plus-year-old home, that's a lot of exposure to weather. And $15,000, it doesn't get you very far to cover a whole house if you've taken all the windows out. So in my mind, I didn't have a problem with the fee, but I did wonder similarly if you guys had discussed letter of credit.
Not specifically, but there were a lot of changes since this was drafted. This has been drafted over a year plus, and so I know there were a lot of changes to the city's tree ordinance or tree escrow requirements, and so I think there could be changes based on recommendations from our finance department on how that's handled.
Any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, this is a little bit touching on the ADU question, as well as the environmental policy. So a couple things, and you can certainly answer in any order, but with a detached garage structure, what we do have in an ADU ordinance is that you could upgrade that to add water and sewer capacity to it, so it's now a living structure once it meets the setback requirements. Would something like that trigger a COA, and do you see any kind of issue where that might cause a denial, I guess, of a COA approval?
So adding a dwelling unit would require a certificate of appropriateness, but also adding on to an existing detached garage or building a new detached garage would also require a certificate of appropriateness. So in both situations, whether there's existing space that's being used or remodeled, or if they're building a new garage or adding onto a garage, a certificate of appropriateness would be required. The certificate of appropriateness would be reviewed in terms of the Secretary of the Interior Standards of Rehabilitation. And so it would be reviewed as far as more of like a design architectural lens, not necessarily adding a residential unit to the property.
Gotcha. And I'm guessing like water capacity, sewer capacity, you don't really see those. And so that shouldn't be a factor that might cause a denial of some kind. Now with climate change, that's happening everywhere. And the materials are changing. That's more weather resistant, that could conserve heat and cold, like windows. If the climate action plan and study that we have is encouraging residents to weatherize their homes to make it more energy efficient, do you see anything there that would be in conflict with the facade or the outward facing look of these properties? And I know you had like a couple different home examples, like Spanish style, colonial style, etc. If I wanted to change the windows and I can't have two separate panes, but I want to upgrade to a different style that's more energy efficient, do you see anything there that might cause a conflict with a resident trying to weatherize or meet some kind of climate goal, being in conflict with the facade and the look and feel of these homes?
I'll use like roofing material as an example. I know in the past few years there was a situation where a property owner wanted to change out a tile roof, or they were putting a new type of roof on a house with a remodel. And the existing house had like a Spanish style clay type roof. And the proposed material at that point in time was a material that's made to look like a clay tile roof, but it wasn't a clay tile roof for those reasons. So I think in situations like that where materials look like the existing materials, those would be reviewed with the building permits that come in.
Sure.
I think there are situations where there are certain windows and things are made now differently, where people can add different divided lights and windows and types of windows to make windows more energy efficient but still look a certain way.
Gotcha. And I could see that being, unique design, unique materials, like metal that looks like clay. It could probably be way more expensive than changing the roof with like a different kind of material, So I'm sure this year will have their work cut out for them to really evaluate that. I didn't see paint and paint colors as being a requirement. Like if I wanted to paint my house green and it doesn't look like the teal color or the beige color of some of these homes, like would that be allowed in this district?
Yes, that's allowed today, and it doesn't change with these proposed amendments.
So it just seems curious that, the facade and the look and feel is so important, but changing the color could completely change the neighborhood. But that's just one observation that I saw in the proposal.
Can I just chime in? I used to live in a historic neighborhood in Baltimore, and you had to submit your paint chips, and that's not what we're about. So we're quite flexible in response.
Paint can be changed pretty easily if needed.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Don't get any ideas. Commissioner Elkire.
Thanks for the presentation. A couple quick questions. You mentioned a similar district in Baltimore. Did the process include looking at other preservation districts and see what negative incentives they offered? Maybe escrows, maybe other things?
We asked our consultants today if they were familiar with any Minnesota municipalities that had an escrow fee similar to ours, and there wasn't any that were similar to your knowledge. As far as we leaned on our consultants, they do a lot of work in the state of Minnesota, so we leaned on them to provide some examples or situations that they could give their feedback on certain situations or questions that we had.
Okay. And then I looked at Better Together yesterday, or maybe the day before, and there were half a dozen, maybe more, comments uniformly positive, I felt. Were there any that were not positive that you can recall?
I believe there was one voicemail that was transcribed into the system that was either yesterday or the day before. And I think the general message is that the way things are working, so it should stay the same.
Okay. And the document that includes the escrow information has been available for residents to review.
Yep, that went out. Information specific to each document went out to residents, property owners within the district, and property owners that own landmark properties. I included a link to the Better Together page that had all of those documents on it, to the email list for contractors that I had. And then the public hearings, notice for the public hearings were posted in the paper for tonight's Planning Commission meeting and also for next week's City Council meeting. But those documents have been available since that Better Together page has been on.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Felt.
I'm going to ask. There. When I was reading through the documents, there was a lot of talk about the period that the country club was started in and the covenants that were dictating the style and whatever the home, and I'm kind of asking, during this process, did you guys consider it all, as part of those restrictive covenants, there's also discriminatory covenants in there? Did you guys talk about that?
So the Heritage Preservation Commission has reviewed that or has talked about that in the past. I think in 2022, the consultant at that time kind of worked on a biography of the Thorpes, and they talked about that in that document that was created and approved or reviewed by the Heritage Preservation Commission. That past history and everything is on the Heritage Preservation Commission website that pertains to the Country Club District. In the plan of treatment document, it didn't go into all the background on all those racial covenants at that time. The document really tried to stick to the architectural piece that's kind of trying to focus and get information to people about that piece of the neighborhood or process that we were doing. I know Jane was part of the Just Deeds leadership in her neighborhood. So.
Yeah, thank you for raising that important and unfortunate reality. So as Emily said, we did explicitly discuss it and decided that the plan of treatment was not the correct place for it to land. That information is on the city's website, and ongoing public education is important. I know when we've done neighborhood walking tours, we explicitly call that out. As Emily said, there were block captains to spread the information through Just Deeds. Many people, including myself, decided to renounce the racial covenants in their deeds. So I think it's important. We just decided this wasn't the correct venue for it.
Yeah, because I know the city does have the webpage, and they do have the mapping prejudice map and the link to the Just Deeds, and that there is some help for that as well, and that the city's taken those racial discriminatory covenants off 52 properties, 52, and this is not just Edina Country Club. This is all over Edina. There's 2,800 properties that have that. And I just, when you talked about the survey, I was like, oh, this would be another great way to kind of let people know that they can go and.
Yeah, sure. If this does go forward in whatever form, our volunteer commission will have a public outreach piece next year. And so that would certainly be an opportunity, because I think putting something in writing to homeowners. And so I personally would love to emphasize that. So thanks for your concern.
Yeah, because I think some people just aren't aware of it.
Commissioner Alkire.
Could I ask you to say a little bit more about why it's not an appropriate place to talk about that? Because there's almost 200 words of description of how the zoning history and country club is so great and wonderful. I don't know, it just seems missing.
I mean, either one, I guess.
I think a case could be made, and if something's important, it's, language we could put in. We just made a different decision, so.
Agreed. I think we can, if there's feelings to add additional information to that document, that could be part of a recommendation.
Great, thank you.
I think even as simple as in the purpose and objective, making sure that it's specifically saying is about protecting the architectural integrity of the neighborhood, the historic architecture. I mean, that's the piece that this is about. Might be another way to get at it, but I agree that there probably should be. The reason this was preserved is in part because of the covenants, where other neighborhoods didn't have that historical protection over the years. So I think it's worth a footnote at least.
So I guess that's, excuse me, I guess that's a good segue to my question, which is, so I'm reading over the draft examples of architectural styles document. And it says, this guide describes character-defining features of these 7 styles, although most of the homes in the country club are not pure specimens of any particular style, so we should not expect them to follow any of the rules laid out in architectural textbooks. So if none of these are pure, and entire European villages could be built in one of these styles, and these would presumably have houses and apartments and businesses on Main Street all in, whatever style this is. Why does it get so specific about height and stories and all that sort of stuff? Because the style is more than just a house, right? I mean, what if we wanted to build affordable housing here, for example? Could we match the style of the houses? I don't understand why it gets so specific, especially since these are not pure. They're just, I'm going to continue saying, local builders and their clients develop their own rules of style based on prevailing notions of taste and convenience. I mean, I don't know. It just seems very vague to me. It's not like we're protecting something very pure here. So,
Do either one of you want to adjust the review of COAs? Hi, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Rachel Peterson with Hess Royce & Company. I'm one of the consultants working with the HPC. And our goal with that document was primarily to provide more information to homeowners and contractors. And while, as you correctly note, that the houses in the Country Club District are not pure architectural specimens, our goal with that language was to identify the reality of the architecture here, that there are kind of plug-and-play pieces, and that if you come in with a colonial revival house that has some, little French eclectic element, it's not, we need to evaluate the house based on what it is. And just because it isn't a pure colonial revival doesn't mean it isn't of worth. And so I think we wanted that document to identify the dominant architectural styles in the district to avoid a situation where, maybe you have a cute Tudor revival, but your neighbor down the way has these really, awesome French doors on the front of their house. Why can't I put those on mine? Because my house is primarily a Tudor revival. That's an element of another style. It's inappropriate to put it on my house. And so it gives that kind of underlayment so that hopefully applicants have more information to understand what is important about their own property and therefore what changes might or might not be appropriate based on the styles present on their home. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, sure. But I mean, this is the confluence between what this organization does, which is the style, and what we do as an organization, which is, land use planning. So I'm just trying to point out the kind of contradiction there. So.
Sure, understood.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. All right, this is a public hearing, so we will open it to that. Mention the information again for those tuning in remotely. Please call the following number, 312-535-5110. Enter access code 2632-058-2795. The password's 5454. This should all be on the screen. And then press star 3 on your keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak, which is now. So push star 3. And in the meantime, we'll give you time to do that. We will open it to anyone who is here in person to come up to a podium and testify again. Please state your full name, your address, and you have 3 minutes. Come forward. Thank you. Either one.
Full name, what else?
Address. You know.
So Brandon Swanson, 4602 Casco, so I live in the Country Club neighborhood. As somebody who is actively replacing every window in our house, so I feel like I have a little bit of relevant experience here. It is not $100,000, and they replace all the storm windows first, and then go inside the house and replace the double hungs, or in our case, we've got these door windows that open. So the house is secure throughout the whole process. Also, in terms of the escrow policy, I do understand why there would be an escrow, but I think that perhaps there could be a permitting process instead for the builders to follow to keep the house weather tight, and have a punitive fine to the builder if they're not following the process instead of an escrow. You know, a line of credit option I think is not unreasonable as well, but it feels like if there was a permitting process to do a demolition and repair and certain requirements for a portion of the facade, and I'm thinking of a particular house in the neighborhood, not the one on Arden, as someone mentioned earlier, that might solve the problem without requiring a bunch of extra funds. You know, in terms of a tree, I don't know the right answer. I sort of defer there. I mean, we've got old trees that keep coming down every time there's a big storm. So, you know, but in terms of the windows, just to say, our house remained weather tight throughout the whole process. They did each storm, you know, one at a time first. And I now have wood new windows that have 3 panes. They're not steel. They're not anything else. They look, you know, like they should have 100 years ago, because my house was built in 1925. So hopefully that's helpful context for everybody.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else who is here in person that'd like to come forward?
Oh, good evening. My name is Cheryl Dulas. My husband and I have resided at 4609 Bruce Avenue for the past 26 years. We have given input to previous versions of the ordinance and plan of treatment, and we have also appeared before the Heritage Preservation Commission to request a COA for an exterior renovation. Over the years, we have witnessed historic resources that have become subject to demolition by neglect, homes that have had delays in renovation projects, leaving unsightly construction sites for prolonged periods, and builders who have had to be pushed to complete exterior detailing as specified in their plans. I would like to express my strong and full support for the proposed ordinance amendment and the revised plan of treatment. I feel that the proposed changes are reasonable, fair, and workable for residents and builders alike. I am grateful to the members of the Heritage Preservation Commission for their thorough and thoughtful work in strengthening and clarifying the guidelines, as well as proposing protective enforcement measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who is here in person? Well, all of you are, but that would like to come forward and speak. All right, seeing none, we'll open it to those that might be in a virtual waiting room. Do we have anyone?
No, we don't.
And it's been well over a minute, which is maybe the delay in this broadcast, so I think we're good to proceed with closing the public hearing. I'd welcome a motion to do so.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. So moved. The public hearing is closed. Before we open it up to deliberation, there's some good comments there. One of which was maybe a different way of, you know, making sure facilities stay watertight. Did something like that come up as a potential point of discussion of fining and maybe the effectiveness of that or lack thereof?
We worked with the city attorney, and so I guess we'd have to confirm with him on what legally could be done based on the concern, I guess, at the time. So when a fee or a fine could be enforced or not. So we worked closely with our our city attorney on kind of the escrow fee, but not necessarily, there was some concerns with fines, I think, at that point in time.
Yeah, because I guess at some point, someone with the city has to determine whether a certain threshold is crossed, regardless, to then use said escrow monies to then, you know, step in and protect the structure. So, I mean, someone's having to make that judgment call, right, at some point. So you think if they're making that judgment call, you could easily do the same to impose a fine. And, I mean, is part of that fine a time-based thing? And is that judgment call a time-based thing? Like, hey, we're going to put this on if they don't get it covered in a week or 2 weeks or a month, whatever that is. Just curious. It does seem like a decent idea that doesn't, you know, break the bank further. You aware of anything?
I'm not. I know the city attorney has talked about that as being problematic in the past. Perhaps you could have a recommendation that the city attorney weigh in on that issue and provide some information to the city council. Granted, this is next week on the city council agenda. They won't take action, but perhaps by the time they take action, we could have some more information in regard to the ability to issue fines.
Because just getting back to the why, the purpose of, those different values, it is really to kind of preserve the historic structure and function. And at some point, someone is making a judgment call with the city on whether to do something about it. So I think it'd be good just for all of us in the council to kind of understand that specific process and how it would play out if escrow monies were used or a fine, and then what would be the appropriate vehicle and or could a letter of credit, line of credit type of thing work as well, like it has for the tree ordinance. Yeah, like it was changed for it. Yeah.
Are we talking about a fine against the homeowner or a fine against the contractor?
Against the builder. So whoever pulled the permit should be the general contractor, the one performing the work. And then could it be a two-step fine of like you're fined and then the city will step in, or is there an issue with neglect of, the fines end up aren't effective and then it'll sit for 6 months with no protection anyway. So I think that's maybe some of the context we'd like to see, or I certainly would.
I think part of that escrow fee document is a lot of it, don't want to say people do it intentionally, but a lot of it's not necessarily intentional, I guess, in my point of view. But that escrow fee document, one of the things that the Heritage Preservation Commission and staff wanted to note is that both whoever pulls the permit and whoever owns the property has to sign off on that. So both parties are aware of what those requirements are and kind of can help keep each other in check, essentially. So if there are changes that are made, or if property does switch hands or something like that, there is knowledge from both parties what the expectation is.
Are there maybe further questions or comments based off the testimonies? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, just a quick question or a thought. If the developer has to pay the escrow versus the resident, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I would guess that the developer may be part of a larger organization that have way more financial resources available, where that escrow amount probably wouldn't be that significant to them. Whereas if it's the resident, it's more of a financial burden on their side, so they might have a stronger incentive to drive the developer to, build the homes according to the plans. And so I'm just wondering if shifting the escrow to the developer, if that's going to even have a meaningful impact.
See some hands over there. Yeah, what you got? Both you guys.
I worry that, we talk about affordable housing, and I know country club is of a thing, but whenever the developer pays for an additional fee, they tack on a 35% surcharge onto the homeowners. And so all these projects end up costing more. And over the past 10 years, it's been quite the increase. So I don't know. I'm assuming, between the developer and the homeowner, they would decide how to do this. But I keep feeling that there's another way to do it. I like the letter of credit, or I like a line of credit, or some other way of doing this.
Commissioner Hahnemann.
I mean, we've used the word developer a couple of times. This is really going to be these are all existing properties, it's very unlikely we're going to have, multifamily somewhere in the middle of Country Club, and we're certainly not building any commercial things inside of Country Club. So this is a roofer, a stucco guy, a exterior painter, shingles, windows, those sorts of things. And while yes, there are, Anderson Windows, whatever, bigger company, you have a lot of fly-by-night roofers, carpenter guys who could leave a whole building exposed and they disappear the next day. So, I think it's actually interesting as a concept to have them have some skin in doing the job, both to the resident and getting paid there, but also performing with the city, because they don't care if their homeowner doesn't get their permit ultimately. That's not their prerogative. They're trying to do their job and then get out of town and do the next job. So I think it's an interesting idea.
We're mostly in discussion period, but the testimony certainly raised some questions, at least in my mind, about like process, especially like using the escrow monies. So let's say that we enact this and then the project's 150 grand and 15,000 goes into that. Like what is the limit on using those monies and kind of the refund of that or the absence of it? Are they going to use what it takes and document that as a cost? Subtract that out of there, follow it exactly. And then in that way, could there be a fine where it's like, you break this, it's this amount, and then be warned you're going to be charged how much this is going to cost you for us to do. I'm just trying to think of a more effective way that doesn't further burden the person doing the project, but just in general, I'm in support of this, but I think it'd be better for the council to kind of understand some of that process, just because we learned that later with the tree ordinance. Any other? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, just to think about the alternative, if, for example, they do get a certificate of COA, essentially, and they go through and they completely do something different than what's on the plans, right? There was a dormer, they took it out and they put up something else. And now the building inspector is going to come back and then try to review everything. At what point, or what is the action that the city will take if the developer did not follow plans? Would they just not get a certificate? And what happens next?
So at that point, if the permit or the project is done and they're requesting a final to go out with the building department, planning staff would also go out and take a look at the project. So if it's found that the plans don't match what was approved, they either would have to make the project match the approved plans to get their escrow fee and their permit closed out, or they would have to go back to the Heritage Preservation Commission to get a COA amendment to get whatever changes they made approved by the HPC before the permit could be finalized out.
So the worst case scenario is that they just lose their escrow?
If they never get an amended COA that matches what was built, or if they don't match what was originally built, then yes, their permit would not be closed out. And they wouldn't get the escrow fee back at that point.
But they will get a housing permit. They can live there.
So for these projects, they're largely not new homes in the Country Club District, so they don't get new occupancy certificates. And so the incentive is to really close out their building permits and to get this. The escrow fee is really used as an incentive to close out their building permits because there isn't new occupancy certificates that are given out to projects that are not new homes.
Gotcha. So I don't know, I'm kind of delaying on this, but I'm just thinking if I were to game the system and I could pay $15,000 to do something unique to my home and I just lose that, then I would just do that, right? If the pushback is just to retain the escrow amount, but I could still go about my business, is that enough of an incentive to really preserve these neighborhoods and preserve these homes? That's the question I have.
It's more of an incentive than there is now, I think.
And the city will step in at some point to try to require, conformance. I mean, just like the patio thing discussed in the last meeting. You gotta remove that you weren't supposed to do, and I'm sure there's some sort of further incentive of fining and. Anyways, instead of maybe getting lost in the nuance, which we could forever, any further discussion on kind of the general spirit of this? And then, Commissioner Elkhart.
First, I want to compliment the work. It's a complex subject, and the materials I thought were really well organized and presented, very well written. I generally support the recommendations. I have to say I've lived in Edina for 20 years, and I always thought the country club was just about preserving old architecture. So I learned in the materials that it's more than that, and that it's because country club is a model of planning and zoning. I didn't know that. I just want to read briefly from the materials. So the district was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and designated as an Edina Heritage Resource District because of its significance in community planning, zoning, and suburban residential development. Then it goes on to talk about architecture. And Samuel Thorpe is cast as kind of rather heroic visionary, tightly controlling all aspects of the development. And if it were just that first statement that it's a heritage resource district because of its significance in community planning, I could probably be okay with that, because that's a neutral statement. It's not saying it's good or bad, it's just saying it's significant. But then what I reacted to after that was, I didn't count the words, but it looked like about 200 words to me of all this information about why it was so great, without any mention of the ugly parts, the ugly bits. And so as I said, I support the recommendations, but not the way it's presented. And I have a motion that we can get to later if the commission's interested in it, to ask for a slightly more expansive view of what happened in the 20s here. That's it.
Thank you. Any other, comments, discussion points? Yeah, Commissioner Day.
So for me, in addition to what Commissioner Elkhart just said, I think the other change here is needed around the escrow piece. As written, I can't support it. I think there has to be at least a letter of credit option added to this. I know when we talk about $15,000 as a percentage of a large cost, $15,000 is still $15,000. It's a lot of money to a lot of people. So, even if you're able to front $100,000, which most people can't, but you're going to have to go and get credit, a loan from your bank, another $15,000 on top of that is, again, a significant amount of money to a lot of people. So I'd say at least a letter of credit. I do like the discussion around potentially finding the contractor. If you're sitting on an escrow piece, contractors, there's some good ones out there and there's some bad ones out there. And you say, well, it's the skin in the game to get the project closed out early or fast, I guess, quickly. Sometimes people reach out to contractors and they just don't respond, and projects take longer than people think. And there's a time value associated with money, and to have your money, held still in escrow if you have an unresponsive contractor, isn't to the benefit of anybody. So I think we need to at least have more discussion on this piece. I'd like to at least see it, I would favor a motion to add at least a letter of credit as an option here. But, I think we could discuss more of the fining piece. And then additionally, another thought here too is that you could add language in about it being the $15,000 in escrow only if the project requires a COA, right? Rather than anything over $100,000 just in general.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Felt.
I think we just recommend that the city and the HRA kind of take a look at that escrow piece. I don't think it's up to the planning commission to figure that part out. Just raise the fact that it is of concern in our motion.
I mean, ultimately, our motion is a recommendation, so even though it might, I mean, it is in our purview because we're making a decision on it, so, I mean, if there's broad support in saying, yeah, we strongly consider that as an option too, I think we should probably get it into a motion if we feel like it's going that way.
But I also think there's no maximum. You know, every time this $3,000 or $15,000 is depleted, it is re-upped. And I don't think we're going to solve the.
Yeah, and I guess just like the history of our recommendations, like we might not get it exactly right, but in this small amount of mean time, it gives the attorney and the city council much more direct focus. So like if we don't incorporate it as part of the recommendation, then
we can say things like, let's look at the escrow piece and look if they're willing to take letter of credit or some other line of credit or credit card, and also consider the ramifications of continually re-up. I mean, I think we can make a motion about having them look at these pieces without saying exactly how it should be solved.
yeah, I mean, that's usually what we do. All right, anyone else? Commissioner Padilla.
I am interested to hear Commissioner Alkir's motion, and depending upon what it is, maybe incorporate that with some of the things that Commissioner Day said. I don't think it's our job to police contractors, so I don't think we shift that responsibility to contractors. But I have mixed feelings about the amount of money, but I would like to hear some combination of, or a motion altogether that we can move forward. So can we hear Commissioner Alkir's?
Well, maybe first, Commissioner Miranda or
sorry.
Smith, did you have anything? Yeah, okay, both of you.
Yeah, so I'd like to address Commissioner Hanneman's point about we're not building, affordable housing or businesses here. It's interesting to review the history of this neighborhood because, actually 3 commissioners live in Morningside, which is just across 44th Street. And Morningside was built first because it wasn't planned the way that this was, but it was built first. It was developed first because of the streetcar on 44th Street. So it was closest to Minneapolis. And so we have our little houses, well, they were little anymore, our little houses on our little streets, and we have our little business district at 44th and France, which is a whole small area plan. And so then, while the streetcar was still in existence, there was a country club was developed, and it was developed as a planned community. And if you look on a map, there aren't a lot of north-south through streets, kind of like Morningside doesn't really have them either. But the ones that are through streets are ones where there were transit stops. So, well, they didn't call them streetcar stops. And so Browndale, Wooddale, Grimes were where the transit stops were. And then if you look on the south side of it, currently where Wooddale Park is, that was a school at one point. And it was a 2-story school, and then it was added on to after a while. It says, according to Edina's Our Town, or whatever that's called. About Town, thank you. In 1936, it was built in 1925 and added on to in 1936, and it was 2 stories, a fairly massive building. It was a school, and actually also in Morningside at 42nd and Grimes, there was a much bigger school than what's there today. So a small business district there, or an affordable housing unit there that was built in the style, and the school was built in the style of that fit the neighborhood or whatever. So I don't think it's completely preposterous to say, I mean, nobody's saying we're building a 10-story tower here or anything, or building anything in the middle of the neighborhood, certainly. But, certainly along 50th Street, where the city has just expanded into 5 lanes here, 50th Street, and are planning a huge intersection with Highway 100, which is just insane. And the 46 bus currently goes along there, so that's currently transit. So for all these reasons, I don't think it's at all unreasonable to have affordable housing on current city property. So anyway, I don't think, I think my comment was justified. So the strictness, I mean, like I said, our job is to deal with land use, and the strictness of the regulations, where it's talking so much about height and stories, I think conflicts with what our mission is. So I'd have issues with that. Even though it's not changing, I'd have issues with that.
Mr. Smith, you got some?
Yeah, I'm still trying to formulate my thoughts, so I hope I don't sound too rambly. But I think earlier it was mentioned that, when we think about racial covenants, in particular this particular area, I think since 2021, there's like 52 deeds, I believe, that were where the racial covenants were removed, and this is like in the entire city of Edina, but we know it's concentrated in this particular region, of 2,800 deeds that have those racial covenants in it, right? And so that's like 2% of the homes that have that. Now, we do know, right, that those aren't really enforceable, right? So we understand that. But, when we think about this city and what we try to do, not just, look at land use, but all these commissions work together to try to align on the idea that we want Edina to be a welcoming city. We want it to be an affordable city and a very livable city. So we have all these commissions working in concert to attack that objective in different ways. And so when I look at the idea, right, of someone moving into this neighborhood and, purchasing a home and then realizing that, there's some history here that would prevent me from living here, right? That doesn't make you feel comfortable in your home, right? That kind of goes against the welcoming aspect of what we're trying to achieve. And so even so, right, the city council back in June, I think, had a resolution that worked with Just Deeds and a couple different organizations to really remove those racial covenants from the deeds. And the cost for doing that is almost zero, right? You could just go online, apply, do it. Someone might come out to your home, work with you, and it's a done deal. At the most, it might be $50 or so. And so my question is, we have this very unique opportunity that we could essentially, in alignment with all the other commissions, have this opportunity to make an impact or to create some kind of incentive for folks in this area to take an action to remove some of these racial covenants. We do know that these homes were built within a certain time period where there will need some kind of upkeep in the next couple of years, which would then trigger a COA because it's a heritage location. So my recommendation, or at least one idea that I'm thinking about, is how could we include a requirement that as part of the COA process, if your home has a racial covenant aligned with it, that as part of the approval process, you get it removed and it's free. And so that might be a way to get that from 2% to a much higher percent, because we do know that within the next 5 to 10 years, these homes will have some kind of a need to do some kind of upkeep. So we have this opportunity now. So I'm just thinking that as we think about making Edina a more welcoming, livable, and affordable city, that we all work in alignment and we support these ideas. And this might be a venue. So you were talking today, John, about what's the argument, right? So I'm trying to make that argument that maybe this is a unique opportunity for us to take advantage of that too.
Thank you. I guess, Commissioner Elker, you got some thoughts to maybe speak to that in some way?
Well, I have a motion that just covers that particular subject. So a condition on this particular subject, approval with a condition. So if there's other things that people may want to add about the escrow or letters of credit or what have you, we can add that onto this. This is not both of those things. It's just the one I wrote down.
Thank you.
So what I would propose is a motion to approve, provided that the history and/or the understand the country club district sections of the plan of treatment are amended to include acknowledgement of the use of racially restrictive covenants during the period of significance.
Short and sweet. Is there a second, or does anyone have any thoughts, discussion? It'd be that particular motion.
Second that particular motion.
Then I guess now would be time to like discuss, and if there's proposed additions or modifications, conditions.
Is this where we would say, and we would encourage the city staff to work with the lawyer to look at the issue of the escrow? No.
Well,
I think
potentially.
this is information only.
This is
Say more,
This
I'm
is
not
a
sure what you
motion.
mean.
For me, it's more about awareness of the issue and letting people, I think having the motion in there to include it, especially because that came to light with me when the background was how great the neighborhood was and all of these strict guidelines for this beautiful area. That came to mind too. It's like there was an ugly side to that too. So when I heard your motion, I heard you saying, like, add that history piece in there. We're not going to make 550 homes kind of do this in the next 5 days or weeks or years. This is just making, and these are 555 homes of 2,800 properties that have the racial restrictions in their covenants in the city of Edina. So I think for me, it is just the wording in there. We're not going to make anybody do anything.
That's exactly right. Well, the motion says is to amend a document,
Okay.
just adding words.
And I was saying I support the amendment adding those words and then a notation that the staff should review with the lawyer the particulars of the escrow. No.
No.
Okay.
But that would be a new condition, which is
fair
anybody
game.
can make.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the city has on their, okay, I'm going to pull it up. EdinaMinnesota.gov, renouncing.
I mean, recall, this is a recommendation, so
Right.
conditions aren't, like, they don't have to be binding conditions if
Right.
they are more in terms of a recommendation. We've done this a number of times. So adding in a condition that the city looks into other options or vehicles for escrow.
Yeah.
But the city has. This actions to take on your own, mapping prejudice tools, assistance from the Just Deeds project. So the city has already done all that. So I don't think we have to reiterate.
I don't think they have, though.
We're talking about just the escrow. He wants to add a line to the ordinance. His recommendation is we modify the ordinance by adding a line. escrow is being handled under their proposal.
The escrow piece on it.
Just
not
the
that.
escrow piece.
Oh, because I was wondering about just recommending additional ways to meet the escrow or limit the escrow.
Yes, that's much more
Yes.
succinct than I said it.
Okay.
Yes. We're all vehemently agreeing.
When you talked about
Carrie,
the
you
lawyer,
wanna,
I got
like-
nervous.
I don't know what I agree with.
Yeah.
Is that in regard to examining the possibility of the letter of credit? Yeah, so you could add that as a condition.
Yeah, or potential fines.
Consider
Yeah.
the,
No, we're vehemently agreeing.
yeah, consider the letter of credit option.
And or
And
fines.
have the
just
attorney
other-
weigh
other
in on the
options.
issue of issuing fines.
And maybe speaking to what Commissioner Smith mentioned, maybe just introducing that verbiage into this, like I don't know if it then would read as like an objective, positive thing that those were a part of this. Also, like I think there could be some discussion around like incentivizing, removal of these covenants that exist. If that's not the right place for this, it's at least a good stance for us to take. Because just adding in that language, I don't know how it will get added in, but does that say like, oh, this is a good thing, including your sentence that you wanted to add? Like it didn't necessarily read neutral, perhaps. I just want to make sure it's certain that we're acknowledging a bad history. You want to read that again?
Sure. Okay, provided that the history and the understand the country club district sections of the plan of treatment are amended to include acknowledgement of the use of racially restrictive covenants during the period of significance. I don't know how that could be a neutral acknowledgement.
Yeah, no.
I don't think that's,
Yeah,
I don't
definitely
think that's
not.
possible. And I'll leave it up to the folks responsible for the document to figure out the right way to do that.
Sure.
There's talented writing, obviously, in that
Great.
group, so.
Commissioner Smith, thoughts?
Yeah, again, I'm just thinking that if we want to follow suit with the city council's recommendation to remove racial covenants from the city, would we want to also have a requirement on a COA approval, the removal of a racial covenant from a deed? How do you guys feel about that? And if no, why not?
I think it's a great idea. I'd like to take that offline as sort of a broader topic anytime there's a sale. I mean, houses are selling all the time, that maybe there's a way to incentivize anybody going through a sale anywhere in the city where those covenants are, to make sure that those are removed, just in the historic districts. So I think that's a great issue, a great point. I just am not sure I would handle it just in this particular matter. I'd make it broader.
You think it's a citywide issue?
Yeah, I think it's a citywide issue. I'd never thought about that before, so I really appreciate you bringing it. Certainly Country Club is a specific design neighborhood with those all included, but it's not the only place in the city. So I think set it aside and come back to it as a strategy for all homes or businesses, any land that has those covenants written into it.
There's probably some legal analysis that probably would need to go into that too. I think everybody here would support achieving that outcome. Whether you can require someone to take language that's already unenforceable and unlawful out of a deed. I don't know the answer, but it does feel like part of if you're going to do it right, have it vetted, make a solution that's going to work legally that can be applied everywhere. So I just think it probably requires a little, I don't actually know the answer. I'm a lawyer. I don't know the answer on whether it can be compelled or needs to be incentivized, but I'm kind of curious to know what it would be. So maybe it does require some additional study and then teeing it up in a cleaner way for everybody to kind of vote on. But totally supportive of getting that outcome, Quincy.
I mean, we could maybe, reach out to the Human Rights and Relations Commission, right, and say, this is something that we discussed tonight, and it could be a larger, broader topic for that commission to look into as well.
And I think the goal of this was just in the commission advisory communication to planning commission and council, especially that background there. And there were several places in all of our documents where they talked about the background, but especially this one where you're talking about the majority of homes were built from 1924 to 1944, the district's period of significance, and then all of the wonderful restrictions that made this such a unique property without, in that advisory commission, just adding a line, which I think you did, about some of the additional history that happened because of those restrictions. That's all I want to see in the advisory commission, in the commission advisory communication to the city council.
Just one comment. These covenants were elsewhere, but to be
Yes.
fair, the country club neighborhood is the prime example in the city that has been used and shared. So, I mean, it is fitting to try to do something specific to that neighborhood to rectify it, but this might not be the place for it, it sounds. I mean, how do you feel about that? Not compelled? Somewhat compelled? If we keep it going elsewhere?
Yeah, it's just really to get the commission's, just thoughts on it. Definitely not a lawyer, but it's a good thought from Commissioner Bornstein, which is something that's not legally enforceable. What's the difference between an incentive versus compelling someone to do something, right? And for something like this, I don't know where that falls or how that's treated exactly. I just kind of saw it as an incentive mechanism to include it here. But if it's not, you can't bind someone to do that, is that the right place for it?
I'm just getting more interested in the subject as we're talking about it. I was looking at my phone at the section of the city's website about it. I just feel like somebody's thought about this and they probably know the answer and I don't, but totally supportive of whatever means possible to get rid of them. So.
It's a great idea.
Yep.
I'd be in support of either. So, where's everyone kind of feeling right now with just the condition on looking at other escrow options?
So my thought is we use Commissioner Alkire's proposal, motion with the instruction about the escrow, and that we talk about removing covenants as part of our work plan later on this evening.
Since you made the motion, do you welcome those conditions added?
Yes.
So since those changed, we have a new second.
Are we wording the condition on the escrow piece?
Carrie, have you written anything down? Recorder?
That we look at other options, including a letter of credit in regard to the escrow fees. Unless you have something more specific in mind.
Potentially the fining.
Yeah, and the fine piece of it.
I just say it really just comes down to a recommendation to add an alternative to cash escrow, right?
Do you support a new second?
Support the new second.
Any other discussion? Yes, just a little.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out, I guess I was confused by the examples of architectural styles. Oh, it is a draft, so it is going to be part of this. I'm just trying to figure out. And I'm looking also at the country club plan of treatment, and it talks about new home construction. And it says things like, where did I see that? Something about will be built only on existing lots. Does that mean we can't split lots? Is this something over and above the ability to split lots through a normal process, or? I'm trying to figure out where I saw that.
I mean, as it relates to land use, it's all R1.
Right, but I mean, there are places.
Kind of like subdivision.
Yeah, if you know, some lots are bigger than others. It seems like it's beyond, I mean, we already have zoning for things like that, right? And it seems like it's going beyond what our zoning has. That's the problem I had with the size, you know, the building height or the number of floors and everything. We already have zoning for that. So I don't think we should make it any more restrictive. So I would like to add in addition saying, you know, the city council should consider removing anything that is already discussed in existing zoning, you know, for height and lot and.
Isn't there exception
stories.
given to this neighborhood for like levels, right? You can have 3 technically, or?
The same R1 standards apply to Country Club as apply to Morningside or any other R1 property in town.
Lou, I think you saw it on page 37 of our packet under the paragraph new home construction.
Right, I saw it somewhere there. Oh, the first sentence.
Very first sentence. New home construction will be limited to existing residential lots and their design will be compatible with the original 1924 to 44 Country Club District deed restrictions relating to architecture.
Is that what's in the examples of architect? No, that must not be that. Do we have a copy of that? The deed restrictions, the original deed restrictions. You know, because, I mean, because if, you know, in terms of Commissioner Alkire talking about, you know, also having deed restrictions for, you know, who can live there and what their nationality or race or ethnicity could be, or religion even, you know, this is getting more notable for not being just good things, and you know, you kind of mentioned that. So I think it's worth reviewing that. I mean, that's not necessarily our job, but I think we should recommend to the city council that this, you know, that this was designed to be, you know, something that never changes. And I guess I don't think that's a good thing for a city. That would be my recommendation. You can take it or leave it.
So you're saying the recommendation to preserve the historic architecture is freezing in time something in a negative way, just beyond the physical appearance of the buildings?
No, my point is that you can have architecture, a style of architecture can be a house. It could be, you know, a 1-story house, it could be a 5-story mansion, it could be a Main Street with a series of small businesses on the first floor and apartments on the second floor. You can have all those different types of buildings in the same architectural style. So are we trying to preserve the architectural style, or are we trying to preserve the actual houses? That's my concern.
It is on the national registry. So I think that
It is.
ship sailed.
Okay, well, I'm not an expert on that. I don't know what that specifies, if it's style or the actual houses or what. So, and lot, I mean, you know, no more buildable lots. I don't know, it just seems.
They want to save the existing houses of significance as much as possible, and that's the vast majority of them. That's what the net.
All right, but we've approved expansions to those houses and whatnot, so, okay. Well,
Yeah, because this is
okay, I just find it
America.
very odd, okay.
See what you're saying. Is there general support for that, or maybe? No, I'm seeing not. No. So, not incorporating that as a condition, just to confirm. Okay. So we stand with the second. Any further discussion? Let's just go for a vote. All those in, well, yeah, Carrie, can you, read it, remind us all of what we're doing here.
We would be adding the condition as read by Commissioner Alkire. We'll go back and view the tape and get that exact wording.
Give it to you.
It would be the recommendation to consider a letter of credit as an option to the escrow. We also have the city attorney weigh in on the possibility of a fine system. I think that's it, those three.
All right, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 8-1. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, so we have 2 public hearings. That was the first one. As we expected, it's a complicated subject, right? We want to preserve what's great in Edina, enhance what could be better. And there is certainly an elephant in the room when it comes to the history of the country club neighborhood. So I'm glad that was discussed and incorporated. I think it was important to acknowledge and to do that going forward. So next we have the preliminary plat with variances for 5120 and 5124 Hankerson Avenue. Same process as discussed before. Staff will present, we'll discuss, applicant may present, we'll discuss. Then we open it to public hearing, after which we close. We will deliberate and provide a recommendation for approval or denial. So take it away, Carrie. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair and members of the commission. This is a site you're familiar with. Just a few months ago, we had a proposal to build 2 duplexes on this property. So located on Hankerson Avenue, adjacent to the Grandview District. Here's a look at the existing single-family homes that are located on the site. To the south is the Hankerson townhome development. So this site is guided R1, single dwelling unit district. The property to the south, that townhome development, is a PUD. It's guided for low-density residential, essentially our single dwelling unit district in the comprehensive plan and zoning district. So here's a look at the existing site. Note that these 2 properties, along with the property to the north, are a little bit oversized compared to the neighborhood. They're 75 feet in width. This area was originally platted in 1913, and all of the lots within that plat are 50 feet wide. So you can see the sites that we're looking at were lots 6, 7, and 8, and again, 50-foot wide lots. However, as this area developed over time, and this isn't unlike a lot of the plats on the east side of town, they were originally platted, Country Club District is a good example. Most of that originally platted as 50-foot wide lots. But as the sites were built on, people wanted to build on a little bit larger lot, 75-foot wide lot or 100-foot wide lot, and they simply combined their properties. It's just a simple form that's filled out with Hennepin County to make the properties larger. Reestablishing them is much more difficult and need to go through this subdivision process. So the lots that we're looking at, again, they were increased in size before they were built on in the 1950s. Again, originally platted in 1913. So you can see the property to the north is also a little bit larger. In the William and Bedford block, there's a couple of lots here that are slightly larger, again, 75 feet wide. In 1970, is when the minimum lot size was established to minimum lot size becoming 9,000 square feet and 75 feet is the required lot width. We also built in, I believe at that time, the median average. So if you were in a neighborhood that had lots that are larger than 9,000 square feet, the median of all property within 500 feet of that site determines the minimum lot area, width, and depth. So it's a kind of a complicated formula that needs to be run. And that was largely development in western Edina. So again, the proposal is essentially to reestablish that original plat with 50-foot wide lots. Access would be taken off of the alley to the west, similar as the existing homes take access as well. Just a quick look at the 3-lot plat that's proposed. So this graphic indicates the required minimum lot area, width, and depth. The applicant did run medians, and this is the median that's come out within this neighborhood. All the R1 properties within 500 feet, and all 3 of the lots meet those medians, but they don't meet our minimum lot size. So the request is a subdivision to reestablish the old plat, but it does require lot width variances from 75 feet to 50 feet, lot depth from 135 feet to 130, and then the lot area variances for all 3 lots. So looking at our pyramid of discretion, we're in the middle here. City does have discretion. We just need to establish findings for either approval or denial. A lot of the projects we look at are in that green zone with rezonings where the city has complete discretion. But you do have discretion to approve or deny here. This is a graphic that we've used over the years. It's kind of building a list of all of the similar type proposals that have happened in the last 20 years or so. This is essentially reestablishing those 50-foot wide lots as originally platted. So the city has a history of approving some and denying some. In most of the instances where we've approved the reestablishment of the 50-foot wide lots, it's the last one on the block. The vast majority are 50-foot wide lots surrounding it. In instances where the city has denied those requests, there's a mixture of large lots within the block. So this has come up from time to time when we've reviewed these types of subdivisions with variances, lot coverage. And we often think about if we don't approve the subdivision, we're going to get 2 large homes built on those sites. But actually, so just to go through that, with the 3 lots that are proposed, there would be more building coverage. And the reason being is our building coverage requirements are for lots that are larger than 9,000 square feet, the building coverage requirement is 25%. On lots that are smaller, it's 30%. So with the existing 2 lots, 25% is the requirement. So they could cover roughly 4,800 square feet. If the subdivision goes through, the lots become smaller than 9,000 square feet and roughly 5,800 square feet, whatever that 30% number is. So there's a little bit larger building coverage. It's just broken up into three lots or 3 houses instead of 2. So primary issue for consideration are the findings for the variance met. So in going through the variance criteria, staff believes the criteria is met. The variances would be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the ordinance. The general purpose and intent is to establish minimum lot sizes that are similar with surrounding properties. As I mentioned, most of this area was originally platted with 50-foot wide lots, and that's the way most of it did develop. So we find that it's reasonable to reestablish that original plat. The variance would be consistent with the comprehensive plan where single-family homes are allowed here as well as in the comprehensive plan. And then looking at our practical difficulty test. The property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by zoning ordinance. So again, we feel that it's reasonable. The lots are similar in size to the vast majority of lots within this neighborhood. Again, the homes were built in the 50s, the original plat from 1913 with 50-foot wide lots, and these lots meet the median average for this neighborhood. The circumstances are unique to this property and not created by the landowner. It was a previous property owner that made those lots larger. And we don't believe that the variance would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Again, the vast majority of the homes within this neighborhood are built on 50-foot wide lots. So, staff did outline options for your consideration. Findings for denial if the Planning Commission does not support that are listed. The subject properties are conforming to today's standards with 2 single-family homes. So reasonable use of the property does exist today. There are no practical difficulties in complying with the ordinance. There are larger lots within this neighborhood, again, the lot to the north, and there's some to the west that are oversized. The practical difficulty, it's the proposal to subdivide is self-created. This is what's requested by the applicant, and the need for the variance is created only by the applicant's desire to maximize the return on investment, and economic considerations can't be taken into consideration. So with that, again, we've outlined the options for consideration, but staff is recommending approval. The applicant, we have one online that'll make a presentation, and Chad Donne is here to answer any questions as well. With that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you for standing, Carrie. That's nice of you. Any comments, questions to Carrie? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
So thank you, Carrie, Director Teague, for just walking through this. Is the intent then that once we subdivide this into 3 parcels, that the developer would then put 2 homes per parcel? Is that the intent, or is just 1 home per parcel? So there's going to be 3 homes.
3 single-family homes, correct.
Because I think in the previous days, months ago, when we looked at this, it was going to be 4 homes, I believe.
Correct.
2 on each half parcel, right? So now they're reducing that down to 3 instead of 4. Is that?
That's correct. The previous proposal was taking the existing lots, removing the homes on the site, and then building a duplex on each property, and that was denied by the City Council.
Thank you.
Commissioner Day.
This is more just a general knowledge question. I couldn't help it, but I did the math on the building coverage and impervious surface based off of what's on the table. I got 29.27% for building coverage, and I got 50.19% for impervious surface. So how do we round down, or what do we do when we make that calculation?
Yeah, and I've seen
to conform to code?
And I've seen different numbers on what the lot sizes are, so that can factor in.
Right.
When they come in for building permit, there's going to be a new survey done for that property, and they're going to have all of that laid out in detail. So that's really the deciding. This is more not exact, just general based on the information we have.
Like I said, I just couldn't help it. It just engineering me was doing the math. So I thought I'd ask.
But if it hits 50, it's unacceptable. Right. So anything above it in any sliver doesn't work.
Just real quick, are you able to just paraphrase in 1 or 2 sentences, if it's possible, why the council denied the approval of the project we saw previously? Was there one reason, or was it just kind of all over the map?
Yeah, it was
why are we back here?
Host of reasons. I think the PUD, they weren't comfortable with doing a PUD on just two lots, even though it was kind of connecting to that property to the south. So that was a concern, the comprehensive plan amendment. So those are probably 2 of the main reasons.
some of the reasons we discussed too, as like, why didn't you go a different route of like doing 2 R2s instead of just not asking for as much? Other questions for Carrie? Seeing none, welcome the applicant remotely and the one in the room. If you have a presentation, or any one of you guys, I don't know who is who.
I believe Mr. Benke online is going to present.
We will await.
I'm sorry, I keep hitting the mute button trying to get myself connected.
We hear you now.
You do, and
Yep.
I will also say hi. There we go.
Oh, there you actually are now.
Yes, we are. Good evening, Planning Commission, Chair Bennett. It's good to see you again. I think, really what we're looking for here is a very simple request. We're trying to remove a lot of the issues that were discussed last time and were discussed at council. The big observation here is that these lots were originally exactly what we're asking for in this situation, 50-foot lots, meeting the median width, exceeding the median depth. Basically, they're very comparable to 78% or more of the lots in this neighborhood. We definitely feel that the project fits into the character of the neighborhood. We were disappointed at the previous decision, but it is what it is. I think, keeping in mind here too, as far as, the increase in density, it was, well, we're not handling it the way that the University of Minnesota people did in their report, but we are up against a commercial district. We are immediately adjacent to the whole Grandview area here. We are up against a bank. Even though you saw pictures of the front of the buildings here, when you turn around, you see the back of the Wells Fargo Bank. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is that we are very much immediately adjacent to a commercial district. I think that when you look at, what we'll be doing here, we are basically going to be submitting house plans just like any other lot that we work on in the city of Edina. Each of those applications address the zoning ordinance and the building code. We definitely, address the coverage requirements with Carrie and his staff. We are not asking for any changes to any of the other elements of the zoning code outside of the elements that currently make any 50-foot lot a legal non-conforming use in the city of Edina. It's pretty interesting to see that, as far back as 1913, this was the size lots that city of Edina was looking for and held. And honestly, we've built on a significant number of them over the last 15 plus years that we've been doing residential renovations and redevelopment in the city of Edina. We're very familiar with it. The products that we produce are well accepted. We do feel that the proposal has merit. We noticed that it's very similar to several other projects that were approved. Matter of fact, one of the ones that was approved back in 2019, the 5841 Oak Lawn project, we actually built on one of those 2 lots very successfully. The home sold about the same time it was finished. We did go through the city's recommendations, and we truly don't see any issues with the engineer's report, and we're very happy with Carrie's staff report. I think it lays it out extremely clearly that, this is simply returning these 3 lots to their original condition. And honestly, even now, the legal descriptions for these 2 homes refer to the original lots. They both are, legal description is lot X plus half of lot Y for each of them. And, it never really changed from that. I think Kerry alluded to it with his discussion about lot combinations versus lot subdivisions. We honestly feel that this is a very straightforward and arguably, hopefully not a politically influenced decision. It really is basically just returning these lots to their original platted widths and allowing the original number of homes to be built there. In going through the city's staff report, I was touched on the denial part of the options for you, and I don't see that you have any choice here really, because it talks about the subject properties being conforming and that they are currently conforming lots, etc., reasonable use. That leaves out many realities of homes that are 60, 70 years old. I mean, I know you were talking about Country Club just a little bit ago, and those houses are 80 to 100 years old. Clearly homes have an age and an age limit. I think you kind of were alluding to it in your discussions with Country Club, but the other homes in the city of Edina don't get the kind of care that homes like that get. I'm not saying that every home out there on a 50-foot lot is worn out, but they definitely become worn out, or they become functionally obsolete. And I think those facts get left out in discussions of that the home has a taxable market value of X or Y. You don't really get a clear picture of why people want to sell us homes for redevelopment. As far as the practical difficulties, there's one lot out of 22 within the block that's different in size than ours, than what we want to create here. I mean, that's a heck of a majority. Practical difficulties are self-created. That's a hard no. Clearly, the 1916 plat is in opposition to the zoning that was created in the 1960s. I think we have, just like you were talking about issues with the Country Club, the zoning that came about in the 60s was well after a lot of these areas had developed, and you were looking at areas like Parkview Knolls and other areas like that where you had raw land that could be subdivided, and the larger lots were desired. But applying those newer zoning ideas to the older platted lots, I think is kind of a problem there. And then the last part about it being our desire to maximize return on investment. That's, again, that isn't how things work around here. The new homes benefit the economy, the city economy, the regional economy. They benefit the city with taxes. Refreshing the city's housing stock is a terrific way to invigorate the community. And keeping in mind that a lot of these areas were built out at approximately the same time, the more that you can encourage the reinvigoration of some of these homes by redevelopment or refreshing, I think you'll find that the community is going to last longer, and it's going to have less issue with just overall deterioration and avoiding any situation that would eventually lead to blight or something else. The newer homes, I think if you go through the neighborhoods where they have been built, have really done a lot, I think, to, like I say, refresh the neighborhoods and bring new homes, new home owners into those areas. I think another thing that, you want to keep in mind is that every time a new home gets built and another home gets added to the city of Edina, you are encouraging movement both within and from without the city. So you are continuing to, create a better city by encouraging the people to move in and to, work in the city if that's what they need. I did see in the report that was done by the planning school that there's definitely is a lack of homes compared to the amount of jobs in the city of Edina. So anytime that I think you can add homes to the city, you're going to encourage people who work in the city to live in Edina. So I think beyond that, I'm ready to stand for questions as well.
Well, it looks like you're sitting, so maybe please stand up. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for your presentation. Again, I guess any questions, fellow commissioners, to see you? Not seeing, no one wants questions, so hey, you got off that one easy. Wait.
I had one.
Okay, good.
So thanks for being here. So with the structures you're planning on building on these lots, is it basically the case that you're not planning on asking for any variances for the structures themselves?
Correct. Staff gently let us know that probably isn't looked favorably on in any case, but we've done very well with homes meeting the city's zoning ordinances on these lots, these size lots. We're well versed in how to meet those zoning ordinances. Our work with our engineers to manage our water runoff within the parameters that the city has and the 9 Mile Creek have are it's a well-tuned machine as far as I'm concerned. But we don't see any other variances needed, and honestly, we think that these 3 lots would support any variety of home type and size. So, we're totally open to what our market will ask for, and we'll move on from there.
Okay, thanks.
One quick follow-up to that. It looks like on the drawings, it shows a lower level elevation and a first floor elevation, and that's it. So, the drawing kind of shows an impression. It looks like it's the old, the 2 duplexes, but are these intended to be like 1 level living with a basement?
Not specifically. I mean, certainly if there's a buyer for a Rambler unit, that's what could be built. It could be 2 stories for that matter too. I mean, honestly, any product that other builders or we have built in the city of Edina, I think would be available here.
Okay, thank you. You got it.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you again. There was mention that the 2 homes that are currently there are naturally occurring affordable housing. Am I correct?
Not according to the strict interpretation of that, no. According to the Housing Redevelopment Authority, that really applies to rental product. These are single-family homes. With that said, neither of them meet the affordability standards of the metro. They may be affordable within Edina, but not truly affordable under the county or the state guidelines or the federal guidelines for that matter.
And is there?
With that being said, they are reasonably priced single-family homes, correct, right now, that need some to a lot of work to be invested in them in order to move them into the next generation of home owners. And I think that's the part that always gets missed when that's considered. They these homes don't exist in a vacuum.
So is there a reason that you are not considering building new affordable housing in its place?
I'm not saying we aren't. We're looking for product that meets market demand.
And it's my understanding from last time that you were here that the homes that you were talking about then were going to run in the $800,000 to $850,000 range.
The townhomes, correct.
And so where do you see these new homes falling in that same range?
It's what the market will bear at this point. I mean, honestly, we don't know what our buyers would ask for. You know, when we were doing the townhomes, that was a product that we had designed for the site for a particular market. You know, these three single family lots are no different than any other single family redevelopment lot elsewhere in the city of Edina. We could very well have a Rambler. We could very well have a small two-story. We could very well have a larger two-story for all we know. We do build sometimes to spec, but we also build to a buyer. And if a buyer walks in and wants a home that is in that price range, then that's where that house would be. One thing to keep in mind too, that the redevelopment in this form has a slightly lower cost in terms of the infrastructure. And you know, you have to keep in mind that the infrastructure costs on redevelopment are hugely significant. And you know, having to put in new water lines, having to put in new sewer lines are all very expensive.
So if somebody wanted a 2,500 square foot 1.5-story house or 2-story house, what do you estimate that would cost?
What are your selections? How do you want it built? I mean, honestly, you can't price a home by the amount of information you just gave me.
But I'm assuming it's going to cost, you're not going to get in for under $250 a square foot.
You might.
Okay.
Of hard costs.
We can leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none yet. Hold tight. There will probably be some more questions and or comments for you to react to after the public hearing, but that we will open to right now. So like the last time, I'll give some information for anyone who might be tuning in remotely. And then while we wait for you to jump in the queue, we'll open it to people who are here in person. But the info again is you want to call the following number, 312-535-8110. Enter access code 2632-058-2795. The password is 5454. And now is the time to press *3 on your keypad to get in the queue to speak. While you do that, we're going to open the floor to those who are here in attendance that would like to provide testimony. You can come up to either podium, and you have 3 minutes to do so. State your full name, address. Green means go, red means stop. Thank you.
Hi, longtime fan, first-time speaker, Jessica Fitch, 5017 Hankerson. Thanks for hearing my information. So I have lived in that 4-block area. I owned a house on Bedford, moved to a house on Hankerson. My ex-husband has a house on William directly behind where they're looking to build. So a couple things. We talk about affordability and density. I feel like our 4-block area already picked up the density with the previous 8 homes that were built on the block. Affordability. I understand the idea of building homes to market price. We know this isn't 700,000 or 800,000. It's minimum 700,000 or 800,000 is what these will be sold for. There's no way he's building or they are building $500,000 houses that might meet people like my need. I moved into a house on that street within the past few years in the 400 range and did fix it up to modern standards, but it's smaller. It's not $1 million house. It's a house I can afford for my child. My child runs through the alley from William to Hankerson, where those houses would be, increasing already the 8 units in traffic, and now another 3 houses in traffic. Playing ball becomes more difficult, running back and forth becomes difficult. I'm just wondering, I understand there's a Wells Fargo in front of them, but behind them is a really cute little 9-year-old boy that I care a lot about. Separately, it's changing the makeup of our neighborhood. We've got a lot more people driving through there. That's just a concern in general. We talked about the safety, we talked about the density. I think we've just done our job already for our 4-block area. We've picked up the density. And really, I think it's just, we would like to keep our street the neighborhood it is. There are a lot of houses that are bigger than a 50-foot lot. It's just not directly on the front of that end. It's 1 street over, it's a half street over. There are a lot of lots that are more than 50 feet. And I don't know why we're looking at 110 years ago was, hey, it was created like that, so it's okay to go back to that. Our neighborhood is established the way it is. I say leave those 2 houses. Hopefully somebody like me can get in there, put $50,000 in the house and make it up to code or whatever up to livable is for Edina standards. I've been in one of those houses. My friend owned it up to a couple of years ago. It doesn't need hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix up. It needs some new flooring, maybe some new roofing. You don't need to have $800,000 to live in Edina. That's all I want to share.
Thank you very much.
Hi guys,
Hello.
This is exciting. Well, thank you for listening to us. My name is Elizabeth McDonald. My address is 5221 Interlochen Boulevard. Even though it's Interlochen Boulevard, the house faces Hankerson, so it's just at the other end of where the development is supposed to be. Personally, I'm opposed to the proposed rezoning for the following: 1, increased population without infrastructure. Growth strains the neighborhood, more cars, more traffic. It's a little less safe. So, my name's Elizabeth McDonald. My husband and I own the home on the corner. I'm reading my notes. I feel a little nervous. Okay, through the meet and greet that we had with the builder at the Edina Library months ago, I don't remember which month, I just was wearing a coat, it was a long time ago. It was clear that there were some concerning things regarding this proposed plan. A number of residents came out. When I was there, there was probably at least 15 people asking questions, sharing their concerns. Initially, the plan was going to be the 2 buildings that were duplexes each, so 4 dwellings, like you guys have already heard. And the recommended selling price for each of those dwellings was going to be $850,000. Which is far above affordability for Edina standards. I would consider $515,000. The affordability, which is per the Come Home to Edina program, that's kind of where I grab that number. The builders had clear concerns for maximizing profits without thought to the impact to the ecological concerns of the neighborhood with the current traffic infrastructure. He was well articulated that though the outward goal would be to invite people into Edina, the reality is that most likely it would be an older couple, an inter-Edina move, much like a lot of the townhomes that they built. He articulated at that meeting at the library desire to change our neighborhood little by little. One of the concerns a neighbor had brought up at that meeting was, you were the builder for the townhomes immediately south to this proposed property, and you turned 1 building, which was 2 dwellings, into 8. They initially tried to turn it into 16 townhomes, but through these kinds of boards got them down to 8. And when that concern was shared, the builder had said, yeah, little by little, as old homes come up for sale, we'll buy them and we'll develop them. And while generally I support, multifamily dwellings as a means to achieve housing affordability and bolstering middle class, these homes do not intend to be sold for affordable prices. I personally am a recipient of the Come Home to Edina program and am familiar with the tremendous benefit that living in Edina provides to me and my 4 kids. The zoning change would only benefit the profits of the builder and not necessarily the community at large. To further prove my point, the same builder took the, I already shared that part. And each of those townhomes sold for under $1 million, right under $1 million each. You know, I would ask that the diversity, housing affordability, and inclusion, getting people to come into Edina, not be considered as a factor of approval for this zoning change, because that was not the intent of the builders as they communicated. And the other impact is that in this neighborhood, like Jessica mentioned, she's my neighbor across the street, there's on just our small block, done. Okay, wrap it up. I'll wrap it up. From 51st to Interlochen, there are 22 children 10 and under. And that's just our little sliver of the block. Much of the neighborhood is that kind of consistency. And the increase of traffic, the increase of adding additional homes, I just don't think meets the need for what our neighborhood needs. And my ask is that you look at the neighborhood ecologically and not just in this situation. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I was over time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sitting here this whole time to wait to speak too. Anyone else who is here in person that'd like to provide testimony? Seeing no one racing to the stand. Anyone in the queue virtually?
No,
Hanging
nobody.
in there? All right, it's been well over a minute there. I would welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right. Bring it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate over this one. Or three, I should say. Yeah. Steve, you're raising your hand. Or is that a high five?
I thought it was a gentle way of asking to kind of respond there. Just sort of a couple of points here that did come up, and you're right. The first speaker talked about an increase of 3 houses, and it's not. It's an increase of 1.
Hey,
The second
Steve?
speaker, go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to deliberate first, and then, I mean, if we have further question for you, we'll ask for it, but appreciate it.
I'll put my hand back down.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, well, I'd like to thank the residents for testifying here today. I think in terms of affordability, that has sailed. That ship has sailed because we. I don't know what our vote was for the 2 duplexes, but that would have been a lot cheaper than the housing they're going to build here now today. So that's a lost opportunity, certainly through the city council. And then in terms of, you talk about building, some of the concerns were, children and speeding cars and whatnot. The thing is, the denser your housing is, the more people there are and the less ability there is to speed. I mean, when houses are far apart, if you look at something, you compare, we were just talking about Country Club, the houses are actually really close together. And you don't get a lot of speeding because you don't have, it's not like somewhere in I don't know, Rolling Hills where the houses are far apart and you can just go very quickly because there's not a lot of people around. So I that's something that doesn't really work in real life. And so to me, what I see with this is that we have three lots that, are basically the same size as the lots that are around there. And this is something I mention whenever this comes up, because I live in Morningside and and I live on Grimes, and we have a whole bunch of 2 lot wide houses in our street, in our neighborhood. And they were all, they're all exactly 2 lots wide. So I think that we should, I'm going to motion to move to approve this, because basically, most other houses most other lots in the neighborhood are that size, and adding 1 house, just really isn't going to make a significant difference. And the affordability thing is something that we can't really change right now. So, and if these were 3 individual lots, the developer right now could just tear down the 2 houses and build 2 houses, right? So the cost of the house is also kind of irrelevant, because we're just going to have 3 houses instead of 2, but they're going to be all approximately the same price. So again, that ship has sort of sailed. So it's basically the fact that, there were 3 lots there. They were combined into 2. it should almost be by right that a property owner can uncombine lots, because that's the way they were. Historically, the city developed larger and larger lot sizes that expanded west, because we went from a sort of a streetcar suburb in Morningside and in Country Club to being very car-focused, cul-de-sac-y sort of neighborhoods that were built in the 70s, 50 years later. And so the lot sizes changed over time. But when this neighborhood was built, these were the lot sizes that the houses were built on. So I think it makes perfect sense to allow 3 lots. Thank you.
I am going to completely disagree with Commissioner Miranda. And with all due respect, there was a mayoral forum, I think it was earlier this week, actually, where there was discussion about naturally occurring affordable housing and how important it is. And I happen to think that that is the biggest euphemism that we use. However, I understand there is a place for it conceptually. So I think that what this would do would be eliminate the naturally occurring affordable housing. The current tax values of these homes together average about $440,000. I believe, based upon what was said at the previous hearing as well as tonight, that the new homes would probably cost about a minimum of $850,000, in addition to the quick math that I did earlier. We were asked to pass a comprehensive plan amendment at a previous hearing, and I had said then it was a heavy lift, and I voted against it then. So I think this is an increasingly bigger ask. And I do not think it passes the third aspect of the variance requirements in terms of it altering the essential character of the neighborhood, because I do think it alters the essential character of the neighborhood by changing the type of housing. And, I'm also interested to know where these people who, are supposed to move. I think there's very little housing in Edina, so that where the people who lived in this house, very few options for them in the city of Edina. So I think at the end of the day, it changes the character of the neighborhood. So I think it doesn't pass muster for a variance.
Yeah, Commissioner Hamann.
So these homes, if real estate websites are to be believed, sold in 2016 for $325,000. That was the market value for their homes then. In my mind, if we took away the developer concept out of this, if you have a home that's 1,000 to 1,200 square feet that was built in the 1950s, and you're sitting in it today and you want to sell it, the person who's going to buy it either has to put a lot of money into it. My guess is the electrical needs updating, the plumbing will need updating, roof, windows. I don't know the condition of the house, but all of those are very expensive, and the home is 70 years old, so it is approaching, by construction standards, its functional end of life. And whether the owner of the lot sells it to a family or to someone who ends up tearing it down, they're not in control of the price. Naturally occurring affordable housing happens when you allow a variety of housing and folks to move through the continuum of their life and the various phases, whether that's single and no kids, with a small family, all the way through you're a senior and going up and down stairs becomes difficult and you need one-story living to going to a place with care. I think this is a neighborhood that is perfect for additional density and is the natural progression of the commercial district continuing to expand, just as it did at 44th in France, just as it does around 50th in France, where the commercial node slowly grows and you get denser housing types because of things like public transportation or the trolley or access to amenities. I understand we have a housing crisis in the city, but the difference between 2 homes and 3 homes or 2 homes and 4 homes, we can't preserve affordable housing that's naturally occurring on a one-off basis because we don't control all the market factors. So I think you guys know, deeply passionate about affordable housing, but I don't know that that problem gets solved through 1 or 2 particular requests that come before us. I am very saddened that we could have provided 2 more homes for folks in the city if the city council had passed the previous proposal. Now we will only be able to provide 1 more net new home for someone to move out of their larger home, maybe, and downsize. That creates naturally occurring affordable housing. It doesn't mean we can save this particular property, but it keeps the continuum going. And I do want to speak to the density comment earlier. Foundations, footings, running infrastructure, that's expensive. So the more units you get in a small area, the less expensive it becomes. The 4 houses would be cheaper to build in many respects than 3 individual houses. So these 3 individual houses can't be less expensive than the 4 just by nature of you're creating 3 foundations, you're creating 3 runs of electrical, you're creating 3 runs of plumbing stacks and all of those things. So the reason we have different styles of homes and different duplexes, townhomes, quads is to make things more affordable. But because we didn't like the setbacks and there were other reasons the city council didn't appreciate it, we've lost an opportunity to have 1 more person either move from a different place in Edina or move into Edina. So I'm disappointed. I think we absolutely should go back to the way the lots were drawn. I think only through more density will we meet our environmental goals, will we meet our housing goals, will we solve a lot of the problems that we're in. And so I support this, absolutely.
Comments? Yeah, Commissioner Day.
I don't have a ton to add because I think that was really well said. But I'll just add additional perspective because I was one of I think the only 2 people that voted against the original proposal. And my problem with the original proposal had anything to do with the actual proposal itself. It was the process and the PUD zoning and how we went about that, which is where the council also disagreed as well. But this, to me, though, is right the end result that I would have liked to have seen, really, when we first were given the proposal. Subdividing lots is an extremely successful way that a lot of communities have gently added density and encouraged affordability. And as far as the process goes, we're following our R1 zoning, we're following our comprehensive plan, so there isn't really much of a lift here. Really, the only lift is subdividing the 3 lots, and I think staff laid it out in terms of meeting the variance requirements. This one's pretty straightforward. So, I just wanted to comment on the process piece. I think, we're conforming to our zoning code. We're not going to be asking for, a bunch of variances on lot coverage, percentage, or anything like that. I think this is a better proposal than what we first saw. And support it as well.
Commissioner Elkheimer.
Just Just real briefly, I support this for the same reasons that others who are also supportive of it have said, so I won't go over that all again. The only nuance I think that I would add is that I support it not because we're going back to the way it used to be, as far as the way it's platted, because I can imagine a situation where I might not want to go back to the way it used to be if we were going the other direction, perhaps. But I'm supporting it because it's consistent with area medians and consistent with city goals, gentle density in this place.
Comments? Commissioner Smith?
So I'm in agreement. I think the last time we looked at this, there was definitely a tension with the zoning to convert this into a PUD. But the bigger benefit was to increase density, and we just believe that density that was just west of here was actually pretty good, and we're just going to continue it into this area. So for the reasons the other commissioners raised, I think this is it's like a downgrade from what we said the last time. And so this works. This works for, what the developers is looking for. In terms of traffic, we're looking at one extra family, which hopefully is not going to be too much more intense than what's already here. If it was going to be multiple units at a parking garage close by, I could see the traffic being significant, but one extra home I don't think is going to significantly increase the traffic in this area. So for the reasons already stated, I think this is a good solution that, we should have fully had before.
Any other comments down there? Commissioner Felt or Bornstein? Guess I'll share a couple. Because we saw this previously in a different form, I personally just am not as much of a fan of what we're seeing compared to what we saw before for a variety of reasons. And like some of it is like illustrative of just the process making it harder to maybe do the right thing. So one thing that came up in a lot of small area plans when we built near them, yet outside of them, like this technically isn't Grandview by the boundaries, was really being mindful of like graceful transitions and, taking care and of the neighbors adjacent to those areas to not bring change cascading into those areas unexpectedly. Not as much as it is a function of traffic, but it's also the function of shape and form and what other, downsides that might bring. So what I saw before was two, one-level duplexes. That was a nice, graceful transition from the townhomes to the other one-story homes. So I think what we missed there was kind of this nice, true mix of use and housing stock that could have been on this place that looks out at Wells Fargo. And as Commissioner Miranda noted then, what he was in favor was like, not doing this anywhere, but this specific spot kind of makes sense for a logical change. So the form and function was favorable to me. So here to just now add 3 homes that will likely be maxed out, so probably 2 stories, very expensive. I'm not as much of a fan of that than keeping it to 2 lots that would then be developed into 2 homes for the net benefit and loss of, the coverage that we, this will take, 9,000 square feet compared to 5,000, or what was it, Carrie? You had it on one of the slides. Oh, yeah, so no, 2 lots with new homes would be 4,900 square feet versus 5,700. I just think by us not allowing what could have happened there, we're just getting a not exciting result as a city, and we're not advancing these goals we claim to care about. So, but I feel like we're backed into a corner because we have a lot less discretion now than we had previously. And what is presented is logical. And now if I were to choose, you know, is it going to be 2 big homes there versus 3? It's just not a great, the win is so low, it's hard to get, it's hard to use even the discretion to get behind approving this. So I'm torn both ways. I can support this. I can also deny this. But I fully supported the previous plan. Yeah, Commissioner Harmon.
And I think I really appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes perfect becomes the enemy of the good. And unfortunately, by the nature of our role, we can only respond to what's brought before us. And once that moment passes, that option is off the table. So whether it's a restaurant on the Keys site, or should this be two duplexes or anything else, right? Once that's off the table, we're not the money or the financing or whatever behind it. We get what we get within certain parameters, or we don't get it at all. And I think, to your point too, this could be less affordable housing, bigger housing, and impact the neighborhood more negatively than the other proposal. But I find it hard to object to going back to the original lots that meet the median of the whole neighborhood. I'm not excited about this as gentle density, but the opportunity passed.
Yep, great point. Any other comments? No? Welcome a motion.
I move to approve based on the city's, staff's findings.
Second.
Just do a roll call vote, starting over there.
Commissioner Alkire.
Aye.
Commissioner Miranda.
Aye.
Commissioner Padilla.
Nay.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Day.
Aye.
Commissioner Bornstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Felt.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanneman.
Aye.
Chair Bennett.
Aye. Motion carries, and this will go before the city council at their next meeting.
Not their next meeting, but the one following, so 3 weeks from this past Tuesday.
All right, well, good luck to the builder. Thank you for coming in to provide testimony. And on to the next item, report recommendation. This is our 2025 work plan. Carrie, we'll leave it to you to present again.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So although we're asking for a decision on this, we don't have to. We still have one more meeting if you're not comfortable. So I'll just put that out there. So to go through, based on the changes that were made at our last meeting, the first initiative is reviewing land use applications, our standard. The second is an update to the zoning ordinance. This is a pretty big one. Staff did put it in the budget for next year. If we're agreeable with that one, I think what we'd be looking for tonight, whether we approve this or not, is leads for that project. Although, given the size of that project, everybody's going to be involved in that one. But perhaps we could assign a couple of leads. The third is the review and update of the Greater Southdale District Design Experience Guidelines. We thought we would bring in Mick Johnson, who helped put those together. So it's taking a look at those standards and do we need to provide any updates. The fourth item is completing the Lincoln-Londonderry Small Area Plan. We already have our leads on that one. And then the fifth is what we talked about last time, was evaluate the use and the efficacy of traffic studies. What do we want to make changes? This could be, or likely will be, in conjunction with the Transportation Commission work session. perhaps bring a consultant in. So we'd be looking for leads there. And per the direction of the Planning Commission at the last meeting, we moved the district plan for the Cahill area into the parking lot, figuring that that can be done as part of the comprehensive plan update that will be taking place sooner than we realize, probably starting that in 2026. So with that, I'll turn it over to the commission for discussion.
Yeah.
Is it appropriate or possible to take Commissioner Smith's idea about looking into how we as a city incentivize or go about helping remove those restrictive covenants? I don't know if that's us thing, if that's people who are interested take it offline and you bring it up with city, but I really liked the idea, so bringing it up since we're discussing our work plan.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's well beyond what we do. And I mean, it regards land use, but I think it's such a specific legal task that I don't know if it'd be effective to be on our work plan right now, or it would just remain like, it's like one of those things that like should be in like not a parking lot, but like you said, take it offline. And I'm sure someone cares enough about it to make sure that it has a pulse and keeps going. But we got a really full plan. And I think just reacting to something right now to either add or then get other things removed, like I've seen that happen not well, you know.
I think we should engage the Human Rights and Relations Commission, right? And say, and you know, kind of push it to them and say, hey, you know, here's what we came up with in this meeting tonight. Maybe that gets added to their work plan, or you know, or they at least are now aware of it and can consider it as a, you know, normal function of their commission.
And nothing stops us from doing that. It's just like, is it measured, and do we need city resources behind that action too, which is part of like why we have things on a work plan. This doesn't seem like it necessarily would to take that first step. So although like, yeah, I mean, there is a benefit of a work plan. We've talked about this before, of having, you know, just kind of like this running list of things that aren't a huge lift necessarily, but like we want to track for transparency to let the community know, hey, we do care about this and we're working on it, especially in the meantime. You look like you're on some, yeah, what you got?
Well, I mean, like, what we're talking about here in the actual plan, work plan, is, you know, working with the Transportation Commission. You know, we could have a work plan item where we work with the Human Rights Commission and come up with, you know, and the city would approve this, of course, would, you know, we give them a recommendation, right? So it's just coming together with like what we just did for the areas of change, right? So that really didn't take a huge amount of time in terms of meetings. You know, we had 3 or 4 meetings. And then we just came up with, the hard part was writing the recommendation, was writing out the document or whatever. But if we had something where, you know, we could propose it, I mean, the city council can say, or the city manager can say no, but, you know, where we'd say we would have a joint committee with the Human Rights Commission where we would both work on it. And our product would be a recommendation to city council.
What are other thoughts? I know we will start working on the comprehensive plan update, and during that process, we kind of divvied out, you know, being liaisons to different commissions too. I mean, I'm just thinking beyond just those 2. I mean, it almost would be beneficial just in general for us to be better connected to the other commissions, where it's not just transportation for one item, human rights for the other, but maybe it's just one work plan item where we kind of assign some sort of collaborative, I mean, even not even a plan, but just maybe touch base and share what they're working on, you know, throughout the year.
I agree, and I think that we could all use more education around it in terms of what the legal parameters are, and you know what the possibilities are that we can do, what is within our purview or within, you know, joint purview. So yeah, I would be happy to sit on a committee or join that or lead that. at least move the, get us all smarter, educate us all, and move the ball a little bit.
I mean, we could do that with a couple specific goals within it, so then they stay measured and tracked. And
Right. I would like a deliverable just because that would be something to deliver, it kind of keeps you on track and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. It doesn't have to be a big, giant, massive undertaking.
other people's thoughts? Definitely don't want to bite off more than we can chew, so.
I like the idea of connecting with the HRC and talking to them about it. I think it is something that the city has done work on already, and I think it is just a continuing education process for everyone. And when we see something, we talk about it. I mean, I think the city's already done a significant amount of work on it, and I think it is just continuing to have conversations with our neighbors, because everybody can look at their own property and see if it's on there or not. And we can tell them where to go. But I do like the idea of connecting with the HRC.
I think that sounds pretty good. It kind of reminds me of, I think it was the last meeting where we were talking about redlining. I think, we do work, we discover things, and then we have to think about how do we address it. And I think we have other commissions that maybe is more designed to look at these things in a unique way, where they might have attorneys that could parse out certain kind of language on what's required or not, whereas we have planning staff and attorneys, but more focused on planning and zoning. But I would love a collaboration. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but if we could figure out how to partner with them and say, hey, here's some things that we are discovering in the work that we're doing, how would you guys recommend we address this, or how would you guys look at these issues? Something along those lines.
Any other thoughts? I mean, is some of it just identifying better ways to kind of collaborate? Just hesitate like us coming up with something right now, adding it to the list, and everyone being responsible for each commission, or just two and leaving others out when we have the opportunity to. Or is this something big enough to just keep as a separate item? Kira, what are your thoughts? I mean, like the council tends to strip us down of things if we overload ourselves, and usually it's their choice and not ours. So that's why I hesitate adding something new that then kicks something else later, which has always bit us in the butt. Pretty much anything that's been like pushed later. It's like, if only we did that when we wanted to do that. Right? Yeah, Lou's like, yes.
Maybe we could take baby steps. I'm wondering if it would make sense. I don't know when the other commissions meet. I'm sure I could look it up. But one of us could just go to one of their meetings and just talk about it. And just say, hey, here's what we're seeing. We just want to put this on you guys' radar. Something as simple as that. Maybe we don't need a work plan item necessarily, but just a messenger just to go over and say, hey, we're discovering some items here. We just want to put it on your radar so you guys could consider it for your work plans going forward.
But at the same time, every other commission is doing their work plan as well, right? I mean, so if the city sees these, I mean, it's up to the city to say, yes, we think that you should jointly work on this together, right, with another commissioner. So, I think we'll get a lot more accomplished if it's presented to the city and the city says it should be formalized.
Yeah, so I think the reason I mentioned wanting a deliverable before is because if we just kind of wave our hands and say we're kind of generally going to do something, it generally doesn't happen. And to the chair's comment about, putting something on the back burner that kind of bites us in the butt later, I mean, the whole, areas of change and the Lincoln and London area, I was proposing Lincoln and London area for 10 years, since before I joined any commission. when the city had this big workshop. It was 10 years ago. And that was shot down one year, and I proposed the areas of change, and that was delayed, and we ended up having to do both, So I think it is important for us to push for stuff, and I pushed for something and it got shot down, and so it might get shot down. But I think if it's something we believe in, we should probably push for it and leave it to the city council to decide whether they're going to do it or not.
When is their next meeting? Do either of you know the schedule?
Next Tuesday. Oh, you mean the Human Rights and Relation? Oh, sorry. That I don't know. It might be something where the chair reaches out to their chair as a discussion, and maybe it's a collaboration. Can you come up with something?
I mean,
September 18th.
Yeah, that particular matter seems just very well suited for a work item for them, not really us. I mean, it relates to land, but not anymore. And it's just, I mean, it's stuck in some of the deeds, so it just doesn't seem like anything that we would work on that they couldn't work on more effectively. I don't know. So I can take the lead in just connecting with them and asking to add that to their work plan. How about that?
And if they'd like someone to show up, I'm happy to volunteer to show up to one of their meetings just to talk about it for 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So it's kind of waving. We'll get it on a work plan. And hey, could you just add it to like our parking lot in case it doesn't get onto their work plan? Because definitely don't want to lose sight of that. Anything else? So should we go through kind of each of the ones and just start identifying leads?
That would be great.
All right, so review land use application. Well, guess what, everyone? You're all signed up for that. Okay, next one, update the city's zoning ordinance. I know in particular I've heard from Commissioner Elkire for strong interest to work on that, co-lead.
I'd be happy to volunteer in that one.
That's a really big one that we have a lot of other subparts to that, so it'd be good to have definitely 2 co-chairs, but then at least a couple other assisters. You too? Okay. Is that great? And then this will be, I mean, this will be something we're all going to be working on in some capacity, and
really
probably
is.
take in
Yep.
small leads on different things. So don't feel like if you're not in that role, but if you want to lead it, now's the time to chomp at the bit. Yeah, Dave
Can I make a
and Claire.
motion that David leads it?
Are we going to have, this is one or just one?
Well, I don't know. I'd rather have a co-chair situation for this one.
2's good.
I'm happy to co-chair with you, David.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And Meriwether will join the team. Anyone else too?
Quad chair.
Quad chair.
Just can't go 5.
But it turns out we're all working on this one.
Well, and that is going to be the case.
Yeah.
It's going to be work sessions, and it's going to take a lot of time from everybody.
And we all know
It's
that.
comprehensive plan-sized work,
Yeah.
for sure.
And you added kind of the specific things we talked about that usually are separate items. So each of those ends up being someone working on them anyway. So
Yep, and we can add to that as we go along, too.
Okay. All right, number 3, review, update the Greater Southdale District Design Experience Guidelines. Who is showing lots of interest for that?
I could hop on this one.
I'll do that too.
All right. Commissioner Padilla and Smith. Anyone else?
2 should be good for that one.
Okay. You got Mick, which is awesome.
Yeah, and again, that's going to be everyone's involvement, too.
All right, and then Lincoln Londonderry is basically just a carryover, and we already have that team established, so good to move on past that. All right, and then we have evaluate the use and efficacy of traffic studies. Who wants to poke that bear?
I see this as more educational, and if there's something that comes out of it, I think a lot of this is going to be staff will put things together for everyone to consider. It might be organizing with other commissions, that kind of thing. Coordinate with the Transportation Commission. Anyone?
Yeah, I can help as necessary. There's one thing on here that, or not on here, that I've mentioned before, and I don't know if it just maybe becomes part of like our responsibilities. Like, it doesn't necessitate a deliverable, but I think it's just something we all ought to be aware of constantly, is like just looking into and trying to implement small and or big changes to the process of what we do. So like, for instance, one thing that was on here was to consider changing the public review process of different applications. And it only got through work sessions, and then the council is basically like, don't present that to us because we're not going to support it. But some of the ideas we had during that of just improving engagement throughout the process were adopted. And I think those conversations and us always thinking about not just improving like disparate zoning anomalies or, you know, something that needs to be changed so we don't have to have variances on it. I think there's always an opportunity to improve the process, which is maybe not as legal, but more of like marketing, you know, like, I mean, communication, that kind of stuff. So I don't know if it makes sense being on here, but I think it should be a part of our job description, and something we're always thinking about, because it does illustrate our commitment to the community, that we're trying to make it better for them to engage, be a part of the process. Better together, even in Edina.
Yeah, I would recommend this. So it would be, I'm sure that's going to be something we look at as part of the zoning ordinance update. But just so we don't lose sight of what you're saying, we put it in the parking lot, so it's not lost. It's there.
Yeah, I can, when we present to the council, I can mention that to them too, because, yeah, they know I'm not happy about that last one. So I'll probably mention it anyways, but. No, it's good. And I mean, that was something, it seemed like staff, you guys just kind of, you know, passed word along, and then it just got done, and there really wasn't much. We didn't really have any involvement in that, which maybe had some drawbacks too, but. Anything else from anyone else? Well, this looks good and approvable. Any recommendations you have, Carrie? Or is that
If
pretty
you're
good?
ready to take action, we could do that.
I think so.
Make a motion?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2025 Planning Commission Work Plan.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. So I and whoever else would like to join and participate, is it October 1st?
Yep.
October 1st, we will present this to the city council in a work session. So mark your calendars, anyone who's there, and if you'd like to speak about something, that'd be great too. All right. So we're done with that. Chair and member comments. Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, I'd just like to say we had our second community engagement meeting with Edina residents for the Lincoln and Londonderry Small Area Plan. We had that on Tuesday. We had about 20, 21 people, something like that, attend, most from the neighborhood, but a few people from outside the neighborhood. And it was a great presentation by the consultants, going through the process and what we had done so far and the work that they had done and staff had done and our volunteers or commissioners had done. So, and the people on the work group had done. So, and then after the presentation was, and the mayor was there, and then there was a presentation, or then there was they gathered feedback by having questions about, what things you'd want to see and how the design of things get developed. And so there were jars with marbles, and you could choose, you had 3 marbles, and you could choose, what things you liked best. And then there were other boards that also described things in a variety of ways to have the future of the neighborhood be. And then you would put a sticker on the ones that you liked and that sort of thing. So it's a way of gathering feedback from the neighbors and the community about what the future vision of that is. So now the consultants are going to go and take all that information and all the other information we gathered and start coming up with a potential design for the neighborhood, and then we'll have another meeting to get community feedback on that. So that's where we are.
Thanks for sharing.
And there were some concerns about, the neighborhood not knowing what was there. So I would like to point out that the neighborhood, Parkwood Knolls, actually has its own magazine, which is quite nice. And one of the consultants had written a 2-page article for it explaining what Lincoln and Londonderry was and how to get more information about it. It had links to the city's website. And we've done, a bunch of as Commissioners Day and Felt and I have gone out and had meetings with the community, and the consultants had done that sort of thing too. There were neighborhood signs with QR codes that you could get more information. And I would like to point out that there is on the city's website, if the second box on the website is Better Together Edina. And if you click on that, on the bottom of the front page is a link to the Lincoln and Londonderry information page, and you can ask questions there. It's got information about who's on the committee, and it has all the details about what's been happening. And there's also a great video that's about 15 minutes long that the consultants did that explains, the whole process and why we're doing it and how you can contribute to that. So you can also even just go to the city's website and type in Lincoln and Londonderry in the search box, and that will be the first thing that comes up. So thank you.
I'm just going to quickly commend the city on their display that they had yesterday as I drove by the fire station, the flag that they had hanging from the fire truck in remembrance of 9/11. And I thought it was a fantastic tribute to the day, and I'm glad to see that the city did that.
Any other comments? I guess I'll just share some recent comments and discussions had with other commissioners and just thinking kind of how some of this stuff connects. But one thing that's come up is just not necessarily the planning commission weighing in on things formally, whether it comes through a public hearing or whatnot, but there tends to be a lot of land use related projects that we don't know about that have pretty big impacts on the city. You mentioned the Highway 100 interchange, this other one that's changing. And I think a good reminder, and I don't know how we can just become either better stewards of that information or help connect to it. But, the city owns most of the property in the city. And a lot of it is what connects point A to B. So a lot of what we do is point A and point B. But we can't lose sight about how you get between those points. And the city has that discretion a lot of times, except on county roads, state roads, where it gets more complicated. But I find certain projects that happen or don't happen, could be much improved upon with that experience of how someone gets from that point, whether it's where they live to that development or that new change, and or where they work or wherever. And so, I was talking to some other commissioners, and it's like, sometimes someone's like, have you heard about this? And it's like, no idea. And we wouldn't hear about that. But maybe just something not necessarily on the work plan, but some piece of that process is like, could we get better informed with, like what engineering has planned, what public works have on their docket. And if there are public engagement windows, like broadcasting it to the specific commission, so then we do have a chance to kind of weigh in and react to it and then share it with people who might be affected. Because I think a lot of like, you build this great development, but you still don't build the best or optimal supporting infrastructure around it or to get there, it's just not going to be as successful as it could and bring our city to the future we want it to be. So, and I just know personally, like engineers across the state or counties, they have very different goals than we do as a city. It's throughput, it's like consolidating entry points, which have residual negative effects on us trying to send people walking and biking in areas. So it's important that we get into those conversations, even if we have very little influence, just to at least help inform our neighbors too of like a change that's coming.
Does Transportation Commission, do they have line of sight to that or not really?
Lou can weigh in on
I know,
that.
I'm looking at
As
him.
a former transportation commissioner,
Not really.
my experience on that commission was very different from this commission. It felt more like things were kind of reported to us after the fact. And maybe that's changed, but it wasn't like presented and then we voted on it or anything. It wasn't anything like this. Part of it is that they only meet once a month, but part of it is that it seems to be run very differently.
Got it, thanks. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that there's a piece that's missing in the conversation or awareness for sure.
Yeah, maybe it ties to traffic studies, but I mean, there's a lot of things that tie to, what help a good development be great, and a lot of it's like out of the control of that development. Really, it's like getting people there safely and in an enjoyable way. So.
Where is that conversation? Yeah, the whole room is mic'd, isn't it? When you watch on TV, you can hear everybody anyway. I was basically asking, where is, I don't know the answer, maybe others do. If someone wanted to go start talking about roads, streets, sidewalks, connecting point A and point B and make sure the connection, everything you just said, where does that conversation happen?
Well, it should happen at transportation. I mean, that's where it's supposed to
Okay.
happen. The first thing I worked on when I joined was the bike and pedestrian plan. And that was something, you work with consultants just like we do here and go with the final plan. And even on that project, I talked to the consultant many times, who's very good. And the plan itself is excellent in terms of explaining everything about the plan. But in terms of the design of the plan, it came up, I'm like, we need a grid, just like a car, you don't want to drive in circles to get places in a car. And we ended up with a totally recreational plan. And so there is no bike grid within the city. In fact, as Commissioner Felt knows, they've just redid Grimes, and we're literally a bike path on that plan, and we have signs and paint and nothing else. So, but it is the Transportation Commission, and I know, I work with a few of them because of parking, and they're excellent, the commissioners are amazing. They're really good, really motivated. They wrote a opinion piece for the Star Tribune a few months ago. Yeah, they're really great people and doing a lot of work. I haven't kept in touch with them, but yeah, that's where it should be happening. In a lot of cities, planning and transportation are one commission, and so that's how it gets talked about. But here we split them up. So.
Yeah, and some of the plans that Lou mentioned, like that's where those pedestrian, like the bike and ped plan, that comes up. But if you follow like some of those transportation studies and plans, like the implementation steps just haven't even been achieved or started. And so, you know, who is holding that stuff accountable? Where are those conversations? I don't know. That's just something I feel like could be vastly improved. Like you mentioned with the tunnel under France, like that has to do with both of the plans that we talked about, and how we're completely omitted out of even a conversation about it until it's reported to us is surprising, right? So I think there's an opportunity to improve whatever process there is or isn't, but it's been on my mind a lot lately. So you got anything else? No. All right, sorry. Any other comments from commissioners, staff?
Nothing from me tonight. I didn't even attend the last council meeting, so no update there.
And I'm not anymore. Okay. Guess one last item.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. The meeting has been adjourned. Thank you, everybody.